guys, Lieutenant Colonel Mitch Taco Bell. I'm your host for Tall Tales with Taco. I know I'm starting early, and I actually want to put that in there. If you guys have a live show that would work, what would work best for you watching wise? Please put it in your comments and leave me a comment. Let me know. I always try to set about 7 p.m. on Tuesday nights, but analytically, maybe noon works best. If you want to watch a live show, what time works best for you? Go ahead and leave your comments in there. Tonight, I am talking to another Marine who, if you've ever seen the Swede from Heartbreak Ridge, this was the dude that the Swede modeled himself after back in the day. And Richard Caruso is a buddy. He lives on the East Coast out there in South Kakalaki in South Carolina. And he's got just an amazing story to talk about. His time as a prison guard, his time as a Marine in Japan, getting out as a corporal, prison guard in Corcoran, which is one of the toughest prisons in the system, and some of the stuff that he saw that just drove him to the point where he had to come forth and try to stop the violence. Any good Marine would do, right? Unneeded violence, you got to stand up and be able to push back on the system. And it takes a special kind of person to do that. It takes a Marine. And without further ado, I'd like to bring you on. Richard, how are you, sir?
Good, sir. Thank you.
Man, I tell you what, this is exciting. So when I asked you to come on the show, you know, it's military theme because you're a Marine. And by God, you got it right there. You know, but it's still just an amazing story that you actually had produced into a movie called Felon. And if you guys haven't seen it, you can rent it on Amazon. I think I paid $3.50 for it or something like that to rent it. Great movie, just incredible. But that's later on in the segment. I want to go back real quick. 1982, you get through boot camp and you become an MP. You're definitely not the type of MP I want to meet on a drunk night coming out of the O Club. How tall are you? How big are you?
6'4", 280.
Yeah, you're a linebacker. I don't want to mess with you. I don't want to
Sir, when did you go in the Corps?
86.
86. So
yeah, I'm a baby, man. You got me by a couple years.
I'm your elder.
You are. Tell you what, 82. Let's see, I was 16 years old. I was getting my driver's license and driving around having fun while you were going through boot camp in Paris Island.
86. I was getting out of the Marine Corps, going and fight bad guys. California.
God, I tell you what. Yeah, take us back. So you did Japan. Was that your first duty station?
No, I went to MP school at Lackland. We were one of the first MP Marine Corps MP classes to go through Lackland. I think they were going through Fort McClellan before that.
Uh-huh.
And, we got to Lackland and we converted the dog kennels out there into our barracks, and ended up building the pistol range there. And the Air Force airmen were seeing us PT and formation and chanting, and they were just like standing there in awe. I don't think they've ever seen any, so everybody in step chanting. And I think we were motivating them. But I went to Lackland, and then after MP school, I got orders to go back to Paris Island as an MP. So here I am saying to myself, oh my God, I have to go back to the island, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, as a recruit, it's obviously much different than going back as a Marine.
Right.
So when I went back as a Marine, I was able to see my drill instructors, most of them, become good friends with a lot of them. I worked for some amazing military police staff NCOs and officers. Lieutenant Colonel Butler, he's on my Facebook. He was a great Provost Marshal. Master Gunnery Sergeant DiBiase was one of the legends in military police, 5811 Worlds. Master Gunnery Sergeant Lovejoy was my recruiter out of high school. I remember I was in high school. I was like, I think it was going into be a junior in high school, and I was a pretty good athlete, basketball player, and I'd gotten involved in an argument with my father. My father was a big Italian guy who was loved by my community, and but he loved his Italian families. It was very cliquish, and Sons of Italy, all that stuff. So his brother was a Marine that fought in Guadalcanal.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew how much he respected his brother, but my dad wanted me to go to college and play basketball. So we had gotten an argument, and it was very rare that we ever got in an argument. And I said, you know what? I'll show you. I'm going to go down and sign up in the Marine Corps. So I go down to the recruiting office, and Sergeant Jeff Lovejoy, he'll see this. Sergeant Love, you know who he is, sir?
No.
That's Sergeant Lovejoy. So he
sounds familiar. I know Lovejoy, but he was an officer.
Yeah, he is the he's the recruiter. And so I walk in, and you see the Army and the Navy and the Air Force, and I wanted to get out of the Marine Corps and be a state trooper in New York. So I just wanted to go in basically and get the background of having that Marine military police background. And I get in there, and I take the ASVAB, and he gets me I'll sign up for the delayed entry program. So I take the delayed entry program, and then I end up going into my senior year, and I graduate. High school, and I forgot about even signing up. Really, I had no intentions of going to the Marine Corps. I just did it as a, trying to get back with my dad. And I'm upstairs, and I'll never forget. It's probably like 3 weeks after graduation, and I'm upstairs watching Gilligan's Island in my underwear on a little black and white TV. And I hear a knock on my bed door, and I go and open the door, and it's the recruiter, Sergeant Lovejoy, and he goes, "Get ready, we're going to Paris Island." And I looked
Wait
at
a minute. Isn't he supposed to be PTing you? You're supposed to sign paperwork.
Yeah, I'm like,
you got to go to MEPS.
I said, "Listen, buddy," I said, "I'm not going in the Marine Corps, right?" And my father was at the bottom of the stairs, and he goes, "Oh, no, you got to be at Paris Island on this date. Let's go. You're going on the Greyhound bus." I go, "Listen," I said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to college. I'm going to chase girls. I'm playing sports." And my dad was at the bottom of the steps, and he goes, "Listen, you signed that contract. If you don't go, you're a coward." I said, "What'd you say, Dad? What'd you say?" I said, "You call me a coward?" And so I said, heck with it. I put on some shorts. I put on a tank top. They threw me on a Greyhound bus, sent me to Buffalo. Captain Pace, you know that last name, Pace.
Oh, Peter Pace?
Yes, he was in charge of the Buffalo MEPS, and then who later was General Pace, right?
Right.
And they sent me down to Paris Island. I'm as mad as can be because I do not want to go in the Marine Corps, right? So I get down there to Paris Island, and I'm this great athlete in this small little bubble. I think I'm a great athlete, right?
Yeah.
So I get down there around all these black guys down in Paris Island, dark greens to us Marines, and they're running circles around me. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be this great athlete. So I'm getting humbled very quickly on Paris Island. And it's probably second phase, and I'm bitching and complaining that I want out of here. I want to go back home. And I'm starting to acclimate a little bit to the Marine Corps. And then finally, when third phase came, I realized, you know what, this is the best thing for me. I need this structure. And we're coming back from Chow, and we're going to graduate in 2 days on Paris Island, 2nd Battalion. And I don't know if you know Paris Island, but across from the Iwo Jima Monument is D Company, 2nd Battalion. And our drill instructors are bringing us back from Chow. We're graduating in 2 days. And he brings the position of attention before dismissing us to run up into the barracks. And all of a sudden, I look down Boulevard de France, and I see this white Buick Electra coming down the boulevard, heading towards the platoon. I'm realizing, oh my God, that's my dad. He drove almost 15 hours to come watch me graduate. Wow. So he's got a trench coat on and the hat like he's mafia. And he gets out of that Buick Electra, and the drill instructor's like, the drill instructor has us at the position of attention, and he's looking at this guy walking to the platoon, and my dad just walks right in it because I'm the tallest one. Walks right in there, and he grabs my cheeks and he kisses me on the lips, and he's got tears coming out of his eyes. He's like, I'm so damn proud of you. And then he looks at the DI and he says, "Thank you." And the DI winks at him like that.
That's awesome.
It's probably the proudest moment of my whole life.
And that was your start of your Marine Corps career. Then you got to come back to the place where you were born Yeah.
And then I came back there and I was an MP and I had a master gunnery sergeant named DiBiase.
Yeah.
He was a legend in the military police world at that time. Everybody that served with me back then, we all loved master guns. And he had a daughter, Renee, right? And he brought his family to PMO and was introducing his family when he first reported to Parris Island. And I looked at this Italian girl and she looked at me and he saw us look at each other. He was best friends with my recruiter, Jeff Lovejoy. So he knew about me. So I'm looking at his daughter and all of a sudden, 10 minutes later, I get called up in the Master Gunnery Sergeant's office. So I go up there and report to Master Guns. I go, yes, sir. He goes, you better stay away from my daughter, Caruso. I said, yes, sir. I said, I promise.
And you married her?
No,
you didn't marry her?
Married my roommate. She married my roommate. But he sent me to Japan. He got rid of me.
That's so funny.
He sent me out of there to Japan. But before I went to Japan, it's a funny story. Another story of my father. I get orders to go to Iwakuni, and my dad drives down again to help me move my stuff back to New York before I fly overseas. So my dad is staying in the hostess house on Parris Island, and I'm getting ready to leave in the morning. And one of my drill instructor friends comes to me and said, Rich, we're having a little get together at the Looking Glass out in Beaufort. Come on out to the Looking Glass because we want to say goodbye to you. I'm like, listen, I'm out of here. I said, because I'm not a drinker, I'm not that. That's not me. He goes, come on, all the guys want to say goodbye. And I said, okay. So I go out there, cool. and I pay my respects to all the drill instructors out there. I was an MP, and all of a sudden, this civilian hits my friend, the DI, right in the mouth, and just blindsides him. So I pick up the civilian. And I throw him over the pool table, not knowing where he lands. I just hear crash and glasses crashing, and I hear sirens coming. And I'm like, John, we got to get out of here. We got blood on us, and we run out of the Looking Glass. And I get in my car, and I'm like, John, I told you shouldn't have came out here. I told you. And so we get to the main gate of Parris Island, and they're my buddies on the gate. We're all MPs, and they just flag me through, right?
Nice to have friends like that.
So I get back to the barracks, and that whole night I'm looking at the ceiling, waiting for the military police to come knock on my door to say I'm arrested for assaulting this civilian. Yeah. Well, I was protecting my friend, and so the sun's coming up. I'm walking out to my car. My dad's at the hotel. I go to get my car, and a squad car pulls up. He goes, Master Guns wants to see you. Well, you tell Master Guns that he can send me a letter because I'll be in Japan. He goes, no, Rich, you got to go down to Master Guns. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So I go up there and he goes, shut the door. And I shut the door and he starts yelling at me. Everyone outside can hear him yell at me. What are you doing? You're leaving and you're out in town fighting and this and that. I said, sir, I go, it wasn't like that. I said, I was standing up and defending another Marine and this and that. He goes, well, that civilian you threw over the pool table landed on a female and she ended up in the ER. And I said, sir, I said, are they going to arrest me? And they said, I've talked to them. I've talked to the authorities. I talked to the female. If you just pay $350 now, you'll be cut clean and you can get your ass to Iwakuni. So I wrote him a check right there. I says, thank you, sir. And left, right. And he goes, dismiss, Caruso, get out of here. And I go out and I go to open the door. And he goes, hey. And I look back at Master Guns and he winks at me and he goes, good job defending that Marine. So then I go and fly off to Japan. I fly off to Iwakuni. I'm in Japan for a year. I'm over there with some more legends in the Marine Corps that I was so honored. Abe Roman, Master Sergeant Roman, who's probably watching this. Just great Marines. And then after that, I ended up in Yuma, Arizona.
Yuma, Arizona? Uh-huh.
I know. Do you know Yuma, sir?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you never sweat.
It's the
just
hottest,
evaporates,
It's the hottest place on earth I've ever been.
Right.
Do you know where P-111 is in Yuma, that Hawk missile site off base out in the desert?
No.
Well, we were out there guarding Hawk missiles in the middle of the night. We were in charge of the flight line. We took the flight line over in '86, but it was all about the Marine Corps, I was getting out. I was short. I had about a year and about 2 months left. And so one day I'm the desk sergeant and at Yuma, and I'm typing up the blotter, and all of a sudden the civilian comes walking in. And I'm typing the blotter, and he looks at my name tag, and he goes, Richie Caruso? And I look at him, I go, Mike. And this guy, I grew up with his family in my small town in upstate New York, and his younger brother and I were good friends, and he was like 5 years ahead of me, and he went in the Marine Corps, right?
Yeah.
Well, now he's a college football coach, okay?
Ah.
So he's like, Richie, can I get a tour of the base? I go, no, Mike, I'll get off, and I'll take you around, right? So
what was he doing out there?
He was recruiting. He was recruiting for Fresno State, right? He was a defensive line coach for Fresno State. So I'm taking Mike around, and I got like 35 days in a wake up. And he says, Richie, he goes, I remember you were a good athlete in high school. He goes, listen, why don't you come to Fresno State and play football for me?
Yeah.
I'm like, Mike, I don't have I'm not a Division I football player talent. He goes, oh, no. He goes, I will develop that, right? He goes, all you got to do is put your stuff in the U-Haul, head to Fresno. When you get to Fresno, you call me and I'll come get you. I said, so I'm going to come to Fresno. He goes, Richie, the worst case scenario, you're going to get your education. I'm like, okay, great. So I throw all my stuff in the U-Haul. I head out the main gate and give the MPs the finger, and they go, you lucky bastard. And I start heading out to Fresno. And
right.
So I get up to Fresno. I pull into a mall parking lot, and I call Mike, and Mike says, okay, I'm coming to get you. So he brings me to his house with his wife, Kathy. I said, I knew them growing up. And he goes, your roommate's coming in. His name's Jethro Franklin. He's coming in from San Jose State. You guys will be having auto together. And I'm like, okay, this is all great, right? We're going to be in college playing football. And he goes, I'm going to get down to the bank. And he takes us down to the bank, and the bank gives us each $100 to open up a checking account, and we're getting established. And so Jethro's with me, and one night, so we're reporting to practice, and I start dating this girl in Fresno. And that movie Top Gun just came out, right?
Right.
And remember Kelly McGillis with the hair flying? And
yeah.
This woman, Jethro and I are at a Carl's Jr.'s in Fresno, and this woman comes flying in in her BMW with her hair flying, and Jethro, oh my God, he goes, Richard, look at that. So I go over there. She's in the drive-through. I walk up to her, and I'm like, hi, it's Richie. I play football here at Fresno. And she goes, oh, my name's Jan, and I go to UC Davis. I'm going to be a nurse practitioner.
My dad's a dean at Fresno. How are you? Yeah.
My dad's a head surgeon here in Fresno, right? And I'm like, oh, wow. I said, well, I'd like to take you out sometime. I go, here's my number. Big call. So I get back in Jethro. He's like, she's never going to call you, right? And she ended up calling me. We ended up dating. And so.
Well, how could she not resist a stud like that? Look at that, man. Yeah, I dug hard to find some pictures, man.
Oh, Lord.
Look at that stud. You got hair and you're a stud. What girl could not resist a 6'4" Richie looking like that?
Sir, you're killing me. So we start dating, and I pull up in the BMW to practice. And Mike goes, come here. He goes, where did you get that? I said, oh, I'm dating this girl, and it's all good, and everything's fine. And he goes, you're going to mess this up. You're going to mess up. He goes, I got the road paved for you to come here to Fresno. At least get your education, right? I'm like, oh, no, Mike, it's all good. It's going to work out. So we start dating and this and that. And it ended up to where it didn't work. Or we were going over to San Luis Obispo one day, me and Jan. And I can't believe I'm talking about this on this podcast. So we're going over to San Luis Obispo, and, she's like, do you love me? I said, of course I love you, honey. I'm thinking you're going to be a doctor. We're going to be very successful. And she goes, well, let's shoot over the mountain and go to Las Vegas and get married. I'm like, married?
That's a little fast. It's only been a month, honey.
So I said, she goes, you love me, right? I'm like, yeah, I love you. And I'm like, okay, well, so we shoot over the mountain. We ended up getting married. And I get back to practice. I pull back in with the BMW. I go, Mike, I got to talk to you. He's like, what? What did you do? I said, I ended up getting married. He's like, what? He's like, what? He goes, Richard, you're going to screw this up. He goes, now you're going to screw up everything. I go, no, Mike, it's okay. Okay. So Jan, my wife at the time, was going to UC Davis to be a doctor, a nurse practitioner. I was going to football practice. Life was good. So then about 3 months into this, 3 months into this, Jan comes home one day and she's like, you see that light over there? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, and you see that TV? I'm like, yes. She goes, well, what do they have in common? I said, energy. She goes, well, guess what? It costs bills. I got bills. You need to start contributing. I'm like, I can't get a job under NCAA rules. If I get a scholarship, I can't. She's like, well, listen, it's either me or football. So I'm like, oh boy. So
man, it was how can we get it annulled in Vegas as well?
Oh, that's what. So all of a sudden, I pull back up in the BMW. I knock on Mike's door, and I said, Mike, I got to talk to you. And he knew. He wouldn't even look up. And he goes, what happened? I go, I got to give it up. I got to go get a job. And I said, it's not going to work out for hearing me at Fresno State. He grabs me by the ear, and he takes me into the head coach's office. And I'm there standing tall in front of the head coach, Coach Sweeney. And Coach Sweeney is writing something on a piece. He's not even looking up. Head coach of a Division I football team doesn't have time for this drama. And Mike says, Richard is going to walk away from this opportunity. He's got to get a job. And Coach Sweeney just looked up for a second and said, Richard, it was great meeting you. If you want to come back, the door is open. And I just kind of slid out the door and realized, okay, now it's time to go be an adult and get a job. And it ended up to where it didn't work out with me and her. I flew back to New York and worked for the sheriff's department, but I tested with the Department of Corrections before I left California, and I ended up getting that. We ended up getting that annulled. That marriage annulled.
Yeah,
so short.
I bet.
But before I left, Mike Waffle went on to be a Super Bowl coach. He was the defensive line coach for Strahan that sacked Brady 5 times. Nice. So he's a Super Bowl champion. And my roommate went on to play in the NFL, Jethro Franklin, and now he's the defensive line coach at Fresno State. And I recently asked Mike, I said, you won a Super Bowl with the New York Giants. I said, what are you more proud of? Winning a Super Bowl, having that ring, or being a United States Marine? And he looked at me and he goes, the most ridiculous question I've ever heard. He goes, there's nothing besides my daughters and my wife that I'm more proud of than earning that Eagle Globe and Anchor and being a Marine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. So you went up East Coast, you did your sheriff gig for a while, and then you got accepted. Was it more pay to come back to California?
Oh, California.
What was the draw to come back to Fresno?
California, I mean, in the 80s, we were right there with the California Highway Patrol. It was all about build more prisons, prison industry in California during this time. They're popping up all over the place. All this farm country in the Central Valley.
Yeah.
The Department of Corrections are going in there and promising all these people jobs in the department and saying, and all these prisons popping up. So I remember I was making 6 figures in with overtime in the 80s. And so that was the draw, was to go back to California and start working in the prison system. I would have never gone down the road of corrections because I wanted to get back on the streets. But because of the money that they were making, I mean, it was just phenomenal money. And
so there's 6,000 prisoners in Corcoran, and what's about 1,700.
The first prison I went to was Mule Creek, and we had about 5,000 inmates there. I'll never forget. We just opened. We were some of the first staff, and I'll never forget. I was on a plane, and Barbara Boxer was sitting next to me. She was a legislator out of California, and she found out that I was working at the prison, and she looked at me, and she said, "Well, so how do you like working at the prison?" I'm like, "Well, I think we're overcrowded. I think they need to, heat the chamber up and start doing their job in San Quentin and getting this population down a little bit." She got, oh my gosh, she went crazy on me. She goes, "Sir, has it ever occurred to you that some of these inmates are innocent?" And I'm like, "Well, if they're innocent, what are they doing in prison?" So sir, at that time, I was all about on one side of it was us versus them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was a crime fighter. I had no sympathy towards the other side. I was a crime fighter. To me, they were all just no good. And I was all about kick ass and take names and let's fight crime. And so I was at Mule Creek, as a matter of fact, and I started at Mule Creek. We had 5,000 inmates, probably about 700 staff members, 5,000 to 700. So figure those 700 staff members are spread throughout 3 shifts. So you'd be on the yard with 1,000 inmates, and it'd be 3 staff to 1,000 with 1 gun. And, you know, so I was on the yard one day, and we had an inmate. He was an infamous inmate named Gregory Powell. Gregory Powell, they made a movie about him called The Onion Field. And it was about
I remember that.
Yeah. James Woods played Gregory Powell in that movie. And what happened was they were being arrested by LAPD officers, and an altercation happened in which they got one of the LAPD officers in a compromising move and told his partner, give up your weapon and we won't kill him. Well, the one LAPD officer gave up his weapon, and they ended up killing both the cops. So that's why in the academies now, they tell you never give up your weapon, never surrender your weapon. And it all came from that incident. So what happened was he was on the yard, infamous cop killer. You know, obviously I don't have much time for him because I don't have much sympathy for him. And he comes walking up to me, and he's got this cat. And he says, I've been taking care of this cat for the last couple of days, and my wife is going to come to the gate. Can you take it up to my wife? I'm like, no, absolutely. I'm not taking this cat to the main gate. And especially for you, right? You're a cop killer. So he went and told my sergeant on me. And I got called in the office, and my sergeant was he was tactfully trying to get me to do it. I said, I refuse to do it. I'm not doing favors for cop killers or inmates to begin with. So I started seeing at that prison, it was just kind of more lenient. And I was all about coming out of the Marine Corps, kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get my hands dirty. And I heard about this maximum security prison in the Central Valley that they were building. And they were going to empty out the adjustment centers. And an adjustment center is the maximum security area at San Quentin, Tehachapi, and Folsom. Pelican Bay had not been built yet. And they were going to bring all those guys down to this place called Corcoran. I'm like, this is for me.
So this is like Stalag 17 of all the bad guys in California.
All the bad guys. I mean, we had the heads of the Mexican Mafia, the heads of the Aryan Brotherhood. I don't know if you ever saw the movie American Me with James Olmos. We had all those guys were in my unit. Those guys, I'll tell you a quick story about those guys, of the head of the Mexican Mafia. One day we had choppers land on our yard. You know what a RICO trial is? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, they had a RICO trial, organized crime trial on the Mexican Mafia down in Los Angeles. So to go from Corcoran to LA, you have to go over the Grapevine. The Department of Corrections was so scared of getting ambushed by the Mexican Mafia, they had helicopters with gunners on the side land on our yards. We brought those guys out all chained up with hoods over their head, threw them on the choppers. They flew them down to the courthouse, landed, had court, and flew them back to us. And that's how dangerous they were. And I mean, the Mexican Mafia, they basically run the California prison system. It is what it is.
Well, let me ask you this: as dangerous as it is, I mean, kind of like a DI, right? A DI comes in, he does his job. The recruits fear the DI because it's just the way it is.
Right.
But you know, he goes home, he's got to take the uniform off. He's got his wife and kids and all that. Did you, when you took your uniform off, did you ever worry about these guys trying to get their cousins to come take you out or do anything? Did you ever get death threats like that? How did you deal with that?
That's a unique question because in that environment, sir, like me being 6'4", 280, 285 pounds, people would always say, well, you probably didn't have a lot of problems in prison. You're a big guy. And my response is, there's bigger guys than me in prison and walking the street. But the problems that I had was the 110-pound guy that was a nutter, that was on lithium, that didn't feel pain. And those are the ones that, I could tell you some things right now that you would have nightmares. And but those mentally ill inmates were the ones that caused the most problems. Where another guy my size has a pain tolerance.
Yeah.
And the key about being an officer in prison and even on the street, and you know this, sir, I believe you have a law enforcement background, is being able to communicate. If you could communicate and you don't go in there trying to be a tough guy, and you're firm and fair, and your word means something when you tell somebody something, and they know that, you know what, you're not going to come in here and try to change us. The inmates will acclimate the program. And my program was, I'll let the shot callers run that unit. In other words, if I have a young Crip that's getting mouthy, I'll have the shot caller of the Crips. I'll have a rapport with him where I'll tell him, hey, you need to take care of Jones, because I know you got a radio up in your cell, probably a cell phone. You don't want me up there in your house, so take care of business. And then all of a sudden that inmate will be coming back and calling me sir now, because his homeboy just checked him. And I mean, so
and when you say shot caller, this is the enforcer for that particular gang?
That specific group, the guy that was running it. So I would have rapport with the certain shot callers or leaders of the gangs inside the unit. And you had to have that. It's almost like dealing with a platoon or a battalion of Marines, and you got rapport with the colonel, or you got and he can it filters down. So I'll give you another situation. We had a situation in one of the housing units, and the housing unit was cut up between A, B, and C section. It's like a day room section. Then you had your cells. Well, I had an inmate from the Bay Area. He was a blood, and he came up to me, and he said, "Hey, Caruso, can you get the gunner to talk to you over in C section? We need to talk to one of our people." And I'm like, his name was Cliff. I said, "Hey, Cliff," I said, "listen," I go, "when you say talk, you're not going to stick him." He goes, "No," he goes, "he disrespected one of the white boys today, and we don't want the white boys. We don't want to have a war. We're going to let the white boys know that we're going to police ourselves." So I'm like, okay. So I call the gunner over, and all I hear on the floor is shuffling, like, shh. And all of a sudden, all the white boys are over in the corner watching what's going on. And here comes this young black guy, this blood, who was all mouthy before, and he's coming up holding his nose bleeding because his homeboys just tuned him up for what he did to white boys. And I go, what happened? What happened? Did somebody hit you? And he goes, "No, I fell and hit my face on the table." I go, You sure? You sure about that? So now those other inmates are seeing that I have that rapport in there, and he is seeing that I have a rapport with the leaders inside that unit. Nobody's getting killed, nobody's getting stabbed, nobody's getting assaulted, and we're not going to tolerate disrespect. So, and that's how I would manage my unit. And but
how do you learn that? How you go to training, officer, obviously to be an officer, but I'm sure a lot of it is the administrative portions of filling out reports and doing this and doing that. But this OJT of dealing with sex and different sections of society, where did you learn that?
To be honest, sir, it was basically OJT. You learn it on the job. You have to be able to acclimate to street gangs and print gangs. And that was a culture that I was very naive to. So the biggest thing was they expected me to be a bully based on my size. Mm-hmm. And when they saw that I wasn't a bully, but I was firm and fair and that my word meant something, it got me a lot of leverage. Because if I told somebody that I was going to handle something, I'll get you a cell move, or my child's cold, I'll get you a different tray. I wasn't being weak. It was, yes, I wouldn't want cold food, so let me exchange that tray. Or your word means something. But if you go in that environment and you're badge heavy, and you start pushing people around and you start using your authority to kind of brandish your power to these guys who are convicts. They got 24 hours a day to think up how they're going to mess with you. I had one inmate come up to me because this one this one inmate was going to throw boiled baby oil, and
He was going to throw what?
he had boiled baby oil, so it was boiled, and I had gotten in a fight with another officer against this other inmate who was assaulting the officer. So I jumped in there to help. Well, this inmate was going to throw baby oil on me and the other officer, and basically like napalm, you know what I mean? And because of my rapport with this inmate that was a shot caller, he stopped it. He goes, "That's not happening." That's not happening. So your word.
So you're like the Tom Hanks. You're like the Tom Hanks of the Green Mile, and the guy that walks in. Oh, what's his name? The sniveling little prick. Yeah, that little prick that got shot at the end. Yeah, you don't want to be like that. I mean, treat people with respect, no matter
respect. It doesn't matter how big you are. If you're man to man, they respect that. What you just said is the key. Respect. If you give them respect, they know you got a job to do. Okay, and they know it's us and them. And I would be out in the city. I'd be working out at Gold's Gym out in Oakland or Vallejo, and I'd be in there with Crips and Bloods working out. I had them in prison just a week ago, and they'd be over there patting me on the back. I'd have other officers take their gym bags and leave, and I'm like, "Why are you leaving? They know us. Are you treating them any different inside? Now you got to worry about it." So a lot of the officers that were left were cowards. They were tough guys behind that wall, but in society, those inmates and those convicts knew we had a job to do. There's a difference between a convict and an inmate. A convict is a guy that has done a lot of time. He knows how to do time. He knows how to beat the system. He knows to stay out of the face of the officers. Don't bring attention on themselves. An inmate snivels about everything, cries about everything. So the convicts would be the ones that would be running the units and the tiers. And those would be ones that I would basically get a rapport with, because they're the ones that are keeping the peace. They're the ones coming to me saying, "Hey, we're going to have a war today. This unit's going to kick off."
And how many people are in a unit as you're talking about?
Well, the units, the new prison, each building would have 200 inmates, okay, to 3 guards, okay. But the way the buildings are made now are like pie shaped. So, and the reason that is, sir, is when we filmed Felon at the old Santa Fe, New Mexico prison, that prison in the 80s, if you Google it, had one of the most violent riots in U.S. history inside a prison. What happened, there was a construction crew that was inside that prison, and the inmates, the Mexican mafia, overpowered the construction crew, got their tools. The construction crew ran out. And back then, prisons were made where they had long hallways and each cell block was joined together.
Right.
So now, by getting the keys, they had access through all those buildings. And that's why the new prisons are divided up into buildings now. You can't get to another building, where before in that riot, guys, inmates took blowtorches, went right for the protective custody unit and blowtorched right through the bars and stabbed and killed. I think they killed over 35 inmates in that riot. And I can send you a video of when we filmed there in the Santa Fe prison. The bar where they cut through the PC cells still are all charred and burned, and there's a silhouette in the cement where they burned an inmate right into the ground. Every time they paint that silhouette, that shadow comes up, surfaces. And I can send you pictures of shovel marks that are in the cement, the divots from them chopping heads off with shovels. And that's in the Santa Fe, New Mexico riot from the 80s.
And were these guys gonna turn witness on them or something? That's why they wanted to kill them?
They were snitches. They were snitches. So they went right to the protective custody unit for them. And so that changed the whole penal system in America to where they designed prisons differently ever since that incident, to where now if there was an uprising in my building at Mule Creek, you're only going to have access to 200 inmates. You're not going to get the whole prison.
Right.
So
now, within the 200 prisons, is it broken out into skinheads, Mexicans, Black, Crips?
yeah,
they don't bunk together. I mean, you guys
well,
obviously would pair people up accordingly so that unneeded violence, right?
when they come in, they go through a classification process in which, they have counselors and people that are interviewing them, looking at their files, seeing who they affiliate with. The inmates want to be with their own people. They don't want to be stuck. So that question you just asked right there is the key to Felon, and I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
They don't want to be mixed up, right? So in other words, the blacks will be with the blacks. If you're a Crip, you'll be with a Crip. If you're a Blood, you'll be with a Blood. If you're a skinhead, you'll be with a skinhead. If you're a prison gang member, validated prison gang member, Aryan Brotherhood, Nuestra Familia, Mexican Mafia, Texas Syndicate, Black Guerrilla Family, a prison gang member is a gang, meaning that gang was formed in prison. They run all the gang members. Like Crips and Bloods don't have any juice in prison. The Black Guerrilla Family runs them. So like the Mexican Mafia, you don't have like 18th Street or the Serdaños. They all answer to the Mexican Mafia, okay? Because they're the ones that it's originated in the prison system. So basically the prison, if you're validated prison gang member, you're going to the SHU, maximum security, where I was. And you're going to be locked down 23 out of 24 hours a day. But if you're a street gang member, then you'll be out there on the main yard with the other inmates. So basically, if you come in as a new arrival, like you saw in Felon, and
Steven Dorff, yeah.
So when me and the director were putting the movie together, he had no knowledge of my story as far as he didn't know how prison worked. So he's like, Richard, how do we get this young guy who's not racial to end up in the maximum security part of the prison? So in the script I wrote, he's going to be on the bus. There's going to be an incident. There's going to be an incident on the bus. There'll be a shank. He doesn't snitch. Then he comes over. So I had to create all that.
Right.
Every prison scene I created in that movie.
Based off real life stuff.
Yeah, it's all real stuff. So basically, they're segregated, like celled up together with their own people. I'll give you a situation where that worked against this one. We had a white boy. He came in. He said he's a Crip. I said, "You're a Crip?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm a Crip. I grew up with Crips, and I roll with Crips, and I'm a Crip." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "If we put you in a cell with a Crip, that set of Crips might be okay with that, but other Crips might not be okay with it." And he's like, "Oh, I'll be fine. Everything's fine." I said, "Then if it doesn't work out and you try to come back to the white boys, they're not going to want you." He's like, "No, I'm a Crip. So 2 weeks later, we put him in with a Crip. 2 weeks later, he came up to us and said, "Hey, they want me to start paying rent." And meaning now I start giving them soups every week just to live with them, right? I go, "Here you go. It's starting." And it's going to go from soups to pretty soon they're going to be bending you over your bed. And he goes, "Well, I got to get out of there." I go, "We told you this was going to happen." So when we gave him a cell move to get out of there, he couldn't go with nobody else because the white boys felt that he was a disgrace. So he had to go to protective custody.
I was going to say, can you put them into another building on the other side somewhere, or they all talk?
They all talk. They're working in the prison during the day in industries, whether it's welding, automotives, and word spreads fast inside of prison. So they all talk. But and that's the whole thing, is getting back to Corcoran and to your question. In Folsom, Tehachapi, and San Quentin, in those adjustment centers, right? Blacks would go out with blacks, Mexicans with Mexicans, and whites with whites. Those yards are the size of a handball court. Okay.
I got a picture.
Yeah, there you go.
That you had from the film.
Exactly, just like that. Okay. So then they built Corcoran, and they said, "Hey, let's bring these guys down that have been looking at each other through the fence for years, calling each other names. Let's mix them up and put them white, black, Mexican, white, black, Mexican." So we knew if I go out with my cellie and there's blacks on that yard that are up next to me, put that yard together, and I get assaulted by one of the blacks, you better handle your business tomorrow out there against the cellmate. So the fights became predictable. And the easy fix was just go back to segregating them,
Yeah.
right? Well, everyone wanted, when I testified in front of the Senate, everybody wanted to know what was the mentality. Why do you think, Richard, they were they were integrating those yards that in the violence, like we were creating the violence? And I said the only conclusion that I have is that fear is very effective for money. As you can see, sir, you being a commercial airline pilot, and you start pumping fear that terrorists are going to bring these planes down, and all of a sudden we're going to need TSA. We're going to have to make it a huge organization. Are the travelers and the passengers safe? Probably. But now TSA is so huge. And so now in the time in California, it was all about build more prisons, build more prisons.
Makes
and
sense.
The public was hearing about all this violence. And we wanted pay raises, and we were telling the public, you don't want these violent criminals crawling the walls into the neighborhoods. And the public was like, no, pay these guys whatever you got to pay them. So they were using that violence to create fear to substantiate the prison boom.
So you guys had a graph going off the wall of shootings and murders and shanks and everything else.
More violence at Corcoran State Prison when I exposed them in 1994 than all the nation's prisons put together.
Jeez, that's amazing.
It's amazing.
And how did the staff, you look at it, how did the staff roll along, get along? I mean,
I was part of that naivety of to where if our governor and our legislators and our director of corrections was telling us this is the way it's supposed to be, and Marine, I was part of that. And I was like, okay, we're kicking ass and taking names, they know who's in charge. And then I started seeing these inmates getting sent out multiple times with the same combatants and getting shot. And I'm like, wait a minute. This something's not right here, right? We know they're going to fight. If we send out Jones and Smith, the Sellies fought the day before, we'd call our sergeant and say, hey, there's things are coming out. And we're going to kick them out at 8:00. Our sergeant would tell us, hey, shoot Jones, shoot him at 8, so we're done with the paperwork at 10, because football's coming on at 11. I mean, this was the mentality. And
you guys, and when you talk about shooting, you were using, in the movie, you had non-lethal M79 grenade launchers. You launching beanbags at these guys? What were you shooting at?
At this time, we had a Mini 14 with a full metal jacket. We had a less than lethal 37 millimeter that shot wooden blocks, 4 wooden blocks, knee knockers, right?
Yeah.
And then we had a H&K millimeter with an explosive round that if it shot inside the inmate, it would explode inside him and not exit. All you had to do is be able to articulate in your report that I felt great bodily injury was about to occur. That's why I shot him with the Mini 14. And so as long as you could articulate, in other words, if I said, the inmate was 6'2" and the other inmate was 5'4", and he picked him up, he was gonna body slam his head into the cement. So I shot him in the lower extremity. Oh, that's good. Good job, Caruso. Good job. We had over 1,000 shootings with the 37 millimeter. Okay, the less than lethal. I loved using the 37 millimeter because I didn't have to real bullet. I knew they were gonna fight.
How accurate was shooting something like that?
It fanned out. So you shoot them at the legs and it would fan out. And these inmates would come cuffed behind their back, looking up at me, begging me, please don't shoot me today, Caruso. I got to fight. And I would tell them, I don't have any weapons, and put them out there. And they'd start fighting, and they're looking up at me, fighting to see. And all of a sudden, I pick up the 37. They want me to shoot them with this 37. They want to go back to their homeboys in the cell block with the abrasions all over them, saying, look it, I handle my business. Because if they don't have the abrasions, they're like trophies. If they don't have the abrasions, they're going to look like cowards. So people are like, they just not fight. Well, they got to fight because their homeboys are back in the unit waiting for them to come back, right? Yeah. So what would happen is you would have officers not use the 37, and they just go right to the 9 millimeter or to the Mini 14. Well, now you're going to kill somebody. You're going to shoot somebody's head off. You're going to kill somebody. So what happened, sir, was I was getting so close to that inner circle of guards that were called upon daily to handle violent situations.
Yeah.
Because like if we had to be a distraction, call Caruso, the phone would ring. My sergeant would say, get your helmet, put a towel around your neck, put socks over your boots so you don't slip in the piss and shit that's in the cell, and get your shield and get down here. So after being utilized, it's almost like being a Navy SEAL. After being utilized so much, you become closer to that inner circle, that core, and you start seeing things and hearing things where you're like, your moral compass starts going off.
Sure.
So those officers wanted me to kill an inmate. I was about to be promoted to sergeant. They wanted me to get blood on my hands because they said, all these guys, all these inmates are coming out fighting because you keep shooting with a 7mm. If you shoot one of the real rounds, they won't come out when you're up in the gun. I'm like, I'm not shooting another human being with a round knowing they don't have weapons. We're looking up their buttholes. We're looking in their ears and their mouths. They have no weapons. They're fist fights. They're in their underwear out fist fighting because they have to fight out of pressure of their gangs. I am not shooting another human being under those circumstances unless he was hurting another inmate to where there's going to be great bodily injury. But these inmates are fighting, looking up at me like, shoot, Caruso, get it over with, you know?
Yeah.
But we had other officers where the sergeant would bring down, say, a new female staff member and have her stand there and get impressed. And he'd say, let him fight. This was UFC before UFC. And so we had a female up there that wasn't even assigned, and it ended up to where the inmate got shot, and the sergeant's like, get her out of here, get her out of here. And so stuff like that was happening. And I'm just sitting there going, wow, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. So now my moral compass is going off saying, you know what? This is wrong. We're killing people.
Yeah.
So I would always shoot the 37mm, and they were trying to pressure me to shoot a real round. And like I said, I had no problem doing it if I was protecting life. I'm no sympathizer.
Yeah.
But so it came to the fork in the road. I either want to go down this road and kill somebody, get promoted to sergeant, and 100% get away with this. 100% I'm going to get away with it. Or do I expose what's going on up my chain of command and try to stop it? So what I did is my lieutenant was a Marine. And I went to my lieutenant, whose name was Rig, and I told him, I said, you know that Crip that got his head shot off the other day? I went to the library and pulled out the press release of Corcoran. In the press release, they said that the inmate's name was Tate. They said that Tate was out on that yard, and he proceeded his aggression on these Hispanic inmates, failed to stop, resulting in him getting shot with a 9mm, shot his head off, right? I knew it was a lie. I knew it was a lie because I knew guys that were there. The Hispanic inmates attacked Tate, and the gunner, they have people up there in that booth there that weren't supposed to be there just to mess them for this fight, and ended up shooting the wrong guy's head off. So they were trying to cover up. So I went to my lieutenant and I showed him the press release, and we went up our chain of command because as a Marine, I'm not just going to blindside my superiors. And I went up my chain of command and said, hey, this is wrong. What we're doing here at Corcoran is wrong. And we were told, just be quiet, keep your mouth shut. We're doing what the governor wants us to do. Who are you to question, right?
Wait a minute. Who was the governor at that time?
Governor Wilson, Republican governor. So I'm like, you know what? Going back to your original questions, I felt, like when the SS in World War II were standing there and the Jews were getting let into the ovens, and I'm saying to myself, how do those SS soldiers just stand there and let this happen?
Justify it.
Yes, in your mind, you're being told this is the right thing to do, and then finally you come to a fork in the road to where you're going to take somebody out. They want you to get blood on your hands, and now you either have a moral compass or you become one of them. And I realized that I'm going to kill somebody and 100% get away with it. And I just knew that I might get away with it here physically on earth, but I knew that God was watching me. I knew that I wouldn't be able to live with it the rest of my life. So when we were turned down by my chain of command, I started stealing stuff out of the prison. Everyone would go home and I'd get a flashlight and I would check out keys and I'd go in secret rooms where the files were all hidden. And I'd be in files ripping out pages of pictures of inmates that were shot, incident reports, grabbing tapes, VHS tapes, stuffing them down my uniform, putting them in my lunchbox, and I'd be funneling it all out to my house. I lived in Hanford, to my house in Hanford with the intentions of giving it to the FBI, right?
Yeah.
So I got all this evidence at my house now of all these shootings and violence.
You're asking to get whacked.
Exactly. So I get a call from a FBI agent named Oswald and Murphy, and they said, Richard Caruso, we understand that you have evidence at your house.
Now, how'd they know? Did you contact them first?
Yeah, we contacted them. Told them. But they didn't know where the evidence was. They wanted to see the evidence. So they said, we understand you have the evidence at your house. Can we come out to your house tomorrow at 8 o'clock? And I'm like, you know what? We need to stop this. I've already told my people. We've been told to shut up. I'm going to give this to the FBI. And, sir, in my naive mind, I'm thinking they're all going to work together and do the right thing and have a kumbaya. And you know how different agencies are. And so the FBI, the next day, my daughter was 4 years old at the time. I sent my wife and daughter away, and I get a knock on the door, and it's the FBI. And they show me their badges. I said, come on in. So I bring them in the house. I take them back in the back and in my bedroom, and I have all this evidence laid out on the floor and on my bed. But the day before this happened, I was at the prison, and my warden, George Smith, I had been involved in so many use of force incidents in which I was a shield man, a gunner with 30. He had always cleared me. I had never been in trouble. He'd always had my back. So right. I have a meeting the next day with the FBI that is possibly going to expose my warden, and is playing on my conscience, sir. I'm about to bring down the general. So I go as a private, I'm talking Marine Corps, as a private basic officer, I go up to the warden's office. I knock on the door.
And you tell him.
He looks at me. He looks at me, and he knows me because I'm involved in so many incidents.
Yeah.
He's, Officer Caruso, come on. And I go in with my head sagging, and I said, sir, what I'm about to tell you is probably going to be the end of my career, the end of my law enforcement career. I said, I have taken a lot of evidence out of this prison, and I have it at my house, and evidence that shows wrongful deaths, excessive use of force, mutilation. And he's just looking up at me. He can't believe what I'm telling him. And he's like, I said, sir, what do you want me to do? And he looked at me and he goes, well, go ahead, meet with him, do the right thing. And right there, I felt like someone was taking a weight off my shoulders, because I went to my dad. I went to the boss and said, Dad, this is what I got. This is what I'm going to do with it. We're all going to work together, and we're going to stop this violence, right? So
But he's in on it.
Well, I go home, and he makes a phone call. I go home. The next day, they show up at my door, the FBI, and I take it back in the back room with all the evidence laid out in my bedroom. Yeah. And the female FBI agent is nervous, and she's pacing back and forth. And I'm like, what is going on? What's wrong? She gets in my face. She goes, you went to your warden. You told him that you took this evidence out of the prison. I said, we're all going to work together and stop this. She goes, Richard, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. She goes, they have 2 special state agents from the Department of Corrections on their way to your house right now. They're going to kick your door in. They got a warrant. They're going to kick your door in because you stole this property out of the state facility. You give it to us right now, or you're going to jail with them. You work for them. You stole this evidence. I said, I stole it based on the crimes that were happening. Yeah. They go, we either get it now, or you can give it to them and kick your door in. I immediately pushed it to them. We're throwing stuff in garbage bags. I'm putting my shoes on. We go to walk out my house, and these cars screech up in front of my house. And it's those state agents. Yeah. And they get out with badges. I'm behind the FBI. And they get out with badges identifying themselves as SSU. And they said FBI. They go, he works for us. They go, we want to know what you're going to do with him. They go, you don't need to know. You need to back off because it's a federal investigation now. Oh, well, what did he give you? They go, we're telling you to back off. They go, you're impeding this investigation. So I'm behind the FBI saying to myself, why aren't we all working together to try to do the right thing? I'm naive.
Yeah, how did they not arrest you?
Well, they couldn't. I was in FBI custody as a witness now. And I have evidence. I have evidence in which crimes had occurred.
Right.
So now one of the SSU agents walks right through the FBI, parts them like the Red Sea. It gets that far from my face, sir, and whispers, "Did you give him all that stuff?" And I'm like, I look like this, like, of course I did. Yes, I want to stop this violence. And he went like this. And they went back in their car. FBI threw their car. I'm with the FBI now. They've been told to back off. We're heading to Fresno. It's 35 miles away. These guys are chasing us. Now the FBI is curious. They've said, we've told them to back off. We told them this is an FBI investigation. They said, Richard, they're calling in the plates on the car to see if they're really state investigators. They said, Richard, there's two scenarios playing out here. You're either what you have in this bag. These are not either state agents, or what you have in these garbage bags are going to be is evidence that's going to bring the house of cards down in the Department of Corrections. And so they risked me into the FBI office in Fresno 35 miles later. And all of a sudden, these two state agents come storming in. We want to talk to Caruso. We want to see what he gave you. And the head of the FBI in the Fresno office comes out. His name was Beasley. And he says, if you two don't leave the premises right now, we're going to arrest you for impeding this federal investigation. They go, we want to talk to our employee. Can you ask him if he'll talk to us? I'm right behind a wall. I'm hearing this conversation.
Yeah.
The FBI pokes his head around the corner of the wall. They can't see him, but he's looking right at my face. They can hear him. And he goes, Richard, do you want to talk to SSU right now? He's doing this. Do you want to talk to SSU right now? I said, not right now. I don't, sir. So then I'm interviewing with the FBI for like 6 or 7 hours. You got to understand, around my house, you got 5 prisons. So the whole economy is being driven by Copland, by the prison system. Like it was the scene we put in Felon, where the baseball game, and we're like, hey, we're the highest paid professionals in this state. We got nothing to fear. You see us at the supermarket. It's all cops, it's all correctional officers, right?
Yeah, where he comes up to his wife and goes, hey, when you get your stuff, tell him you're part of the family. Right.
That's right. So then, so I interview with the FBI for about 6 or 7 hours. They take me back to my house, 35 miles back to Hanford. It's nighttime. I haven't been able to talk to my wife all day. My 3-year-old daughter's in there with my wife. We pull up to my house and the side gate is flapping, right? The FBI says, Richard, stay here. They draw their weapons. They go out. They clear the side outside of the house because they don't know who's there, knowing what I did. And they go, Richard, it's clear. We're going to call you early in the morning. Just go to bed. Go in there. Tell your wife what happened. I open the door. My wife jumps in my arms and said, what is going on? Where have you been? She's all worried.
Sure.
And within 10 minutes, sir, you hear, this is like 9:30 at night. I open the door. I got my pistol by my side. I open the door. It's the 2 SSU agents at the door. And they go, you work for us. We want to know what you gave them. I said, you guys acted so unprofessionally. I said, why can't you guys just work together? He goes, Richard, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. We're going to not let them expose our department, nor would they let us expose their department. They said, will you interview with us? I said, of course I'll interview with you. I want to do the right thing. So they put me in the police car, in the SSU car.
At 9:30 at night?
Yeah. And they take me down to the police station.
No, man, I'll see you tomorrow at daylight.
That's why my story is going to make a better movie than Felon. So they take me down to the police station, and I interview with them for like 2.5 hours. And the one agent has his hand on his head, and he's doing this. When I'm telling him the evidence, he's doing this, knowing that what they got videotapes of shootings. They got all kinds of stuff. So now here's where it gets hairy. They get done. The tape recorder goes off. Now they got me in their custody. They put me back out in the car to take me home. And we didn't have cell phones then, right? This is 1994.
Sure.
They take me out in the middle of a cotton field, right? They put me in the car.
Are you handcuffed?
No. I'm in a cotton field, and they pull up to a payphone. There's a payphone out there. And they call the governor's office, Governor Wilson's office, and said, we got Caruso. And, sir, it's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. What he gave them, it's going to be bad. And the governor, director of corrections said, tell Caruso, just go to work. We'll get up with him. So I go back home. I didn't know if they're going to shoot me in that cotton field. I didn't know what they were going to do to me. So now I go back home. Next day I wake up. The FBI calls me and they're pissed off at me. They're mad at me because I met with the state investigators. I said, you know what? You guys can be mad at me as much as you want, but I work for them. I go, I find it shameful that you all can't be on the same page and have a mutual investigation to stop this violence. And I said, this is appalling to me that these agencies are all kind of posturing and trying to shame each other. I said, I'm just a low man on the totem pole. So I end up going back to work.
How do you go back to work?
Well, now I got to walk into a prison of 6,000 inmates. And nobody knows yet. It's the first couple of days. Nobody knows. They heard that someone went to the FBI. Okay.
You mean the fellow guards?
The fellow guards, yes. So I go back to work, and word's getting out that myself and the lieutenant Rigg were the ones that notified and went to the FBI. So now it's starting to be in the paper, right? They said they didn't have names, and I get a call from a reporter whose name is Mark Arax, and he goes, "My name is Mark Arax. I'm with the Los Angeles Times. Richard Caruso." I said, "Yeah, what do you want with me?" He goes, "I know what you did, and I know you gave all that evidence to the FBI." I said, "I got nothing to say to you, buddy." I go, I'm not coming out in the press." He said, "Richard, let's just get one thing straight. Nobody knows who you are. And if your car explodes or if you come up missing, the public is not going to know what happened. Why? They need to hear your story, because then you'll become a small fish." Okay.
Yeah.
So I discussed it with my wife, and I ended up giving Mark the interview, and I came out on the front page of the Los Angeles Times. He broke the story and used our names. And now I had to go back to work, working in there every day, not knowing if my truck is going to explode. And I happened to have the head of the Mexican mafia. His name was Benjamin Peters, and they called him Topo. He was one of the guys in American Me that was one of the leaders that James almost played, and he was in my unit. The officers that were involved put a hit on me to be killed. Okay, I'm walking amongst 6,000 inmates, and my own people. Now they got a hit on me to be killed. The good cops were scared to support me in public because they didn't want to take that chance of getting their life jeopardized. And in the bottom line, sir, what's happening here is that you have a lot of good officers, you have a lot of good staff, but they're blinded by the money. They're blinded by the system. We're believing in the Kool-Aid that the system is pumping in us, kind of like the SS, where they were believing in what they're being told. Mm-hmm. So they want to kill me. They want to take me out, and I'm in the maximum security. And Benjamin Peters, the head of the Mexican mafia, he's number 2. He's on the yard. He's on what's called a walk-alone yard, and I'm the gunner. So it's just me and him. And he comes over and he looks up at me and he goes, "Nothing's going to happen to you." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "We got word that they put a hit on you to be killed." And he goes, "I'm going to let you know that nothing's going to happen to you. Every prison gang in this prison is going to make sure nothing happens to you."
No way.
The people that you think are the bad guys end up putting a protective circle around me and wouldn't let nothing happen to me, allowing me to exist in that world because they couldn't believe that a cop stood up to stop the violence for people.
And did it stop?
What's that?
Did it eventually stop? Well,
Yes.
so
once we shine a light on it and 60 Minutes got involved, I had to testify in front of the Senate, and we testified in front of the Senate, the legislator in California. I was aligned with some very powerful politicians, and at the time, there was an election, and you had Gray Davis against Dan Lundgren. Dan Lundgren was a Republican. I'm a Republican, and they were about build more prisons, build more prisons. The Democrats were about we need to find alternative motives to send these guys and just warehousing these nonviolent drug offenders. And so I testified in front of the Senate for a couple of days. The hearings, I think, for like a week and a half, and we ended up changing the whole system because the leadership changed. And Now they weren't mixing the inmates up anymore. They went back to segregating them. They changed the shooting policy. They extended the academy for new hires. They required psychological evaluations. So we changed the system, right? Shining the light on it. So at this time, I had filed a lawsuit against the state of California because they wanted me to retire. And I'm like, there's no need for me to retire. I did the right thing. I'm a cop. That's what I do.
Yeah, but how did it work out? You're still going to work daily with the jackasses that are the bad guys on the good guy side, but they're bad apples. And how are you working with those guys, having to look over your shoulder every 5 seconds?
I had already accepted that if today is the day that then I know that I might have some negative marks over here in my life that questionable, but this one big mark, God's going to say, good job. Yeah. I've already accepted that this, if this happens, I'm good because I know I'm preserving life. But you have to understand, sir, and you know this because you've worked in law enforcement, is that when you're dealing with dirty cops, 90% of those officers are great, honorable people that are doing a tough job, that they're not like those dirty cops. Yeah. They might not come forward and expose them knowing that their careers will be over with, but these departments across our country that are dealing with law enforcement that are dirty is such a minute number. And in a lot of these incidents, the common theme that you see with these interactions between law enforcement and the public, the common theme is noncompliance. Where they pull over a vehicle and they tell the person in the vehicle, let me see your hands or comply, and they become combative. So then the force escalates, right? Yeah. But even going through what I went through and how they put a hit on me to be killed, that didn't represent the honorable cops in my city of Hanford that were in with me, that said, Richard, you're doing an unbelievable thing, that had my back. If I would have been abandoned by my people, as far as the honorable ones, psychologically, I wouldn't have been able to make it. The ones that had a hit on me, they knew where I worked. They knew where I worked out every morning. They knew where I lived. I mean, I'd go to work one day. I went to work, and my wife, they're knocking on the windows of our house. It's nighttime, and they're knocking on the windows. My wife's crying with my daughter in the closet, calling 911. I mean, they're harassing my family, and we're living like this, not knowing if this is it, right? But these are cowards. They're not going to come face to face to you. Yeah. And so,
could you transfer into another police department, or what was the relationship between the local police and the state prison police? And state troopers. What's that dynamic like?
Well, what happened is that a lot of the local police and state troopers saw through the bullshit. They realized that prison guards, how are they making more money than us? And the way that we were is because our lobbyists, our union, was the most powerful union. We were contributing the most money to Governor Wilson than any other union in the state of California, and that's why we were making so much money. So we were making more than Highway Patrol. So
you didn't get off any tickets. You couldn't tin your way out of a ticket.
No, well, but the good cops. I'll give you an example. I was in the gym one day, and this is before that I came forward, and I was working out with two other correctional officers, and we would run yard in the afternoon at 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock. And we looked at each other as officers and said, we'll shoot Sanchez at 1, and then we'll shoot Jones at 5, meaning we'll shoot him with the blocks, right? Mm-hmm. We know they're going to fight. But we didn't say we're going to shoot him with the blocks. And these cops are working out next to them. They go, Rich, what do you mean you're going to shoot Jones and Sanchez? And who's getting shot? And we're looking at each other like, why are you in our conversation? We're being told to do this. And like, what do you mean you're being told to shoot people? So it wasn't sinking in at that time because it was all about us against them. These are the bad guys. These are the dirt bags. We're the honorable guys, right? Yeah. And coming out of the Marine Corps, that's what I believe. And then you get closer and closer to that inner circle, and you start seeing things that, I can tolerate that. He threw something on my partner. A convict knows that if he does something to staff, there's going to be repercussions, okay?
Well, what about the booty bandit? So they throw him in with the booty bandit?
Your homework on that, huh? Yeah, they had the booty bandit, and they would throw young inmates that disrespect staff in his cell, and he would rape them, repeatedly rape them, and they would reward him. And I take it that you saw the video of 60 Minutes I sent you on the booty bandit, and that was the actual thing they had inside the unit, that they would feed him like a monster, and he would rape these young inmates.
Was he a big dude? I mean, overpowering? Or?
He was a murderer. He was a murderer. I mean, he was a stocky guy. But I mean, I'm sorry that, you know, if I was put in that cell, I mean, hindsight is 2020. But I always said that if I was those inmates that had been put in that cell, I would tell the booty bandit, okay, well, you know, let me do my thing, and I would bite that penis off.
Yeah,
there would be no booty bandit no more.
Yeah,
but that was able to exist in that environment at Corcoran. And so once all that happened, sir, and the light was shined on Corcoran, the system changed. 60 Minutes came in 3 times. Hollywood got involved because 60 Minutes and the LA Times, and they came to me, and they wanted to buy my rights. And first it was Paramount Pictures that approached me, and Paramount Pictures bought my rights. A guy by the name of Mario Casar. He did Showgirls. I think he did Rambo. And, you know, you want to get with people that are in the Hollywood that basically has been there and done that and get money from studios. So I'm, you know, kind of naive to the Hollywood life, the way that the machine works.
Yeah.
And Paramount Pictures buys my rights, and they option you. So they bought it for 2 years, and they had an option to pick it up for another 2 years. Mm-hmm. So they just shelved me for 4 years. They wrote me a check for 2 years. Then the second check, I think the first check was like $28,000 for 2 years. And the second check was like a little over $30,000. But they didn't do anything with my rights, so I got it back, got my rights back.
Right.
My agent and I were in Hollywood, and we went and did the Dog and Pony show. You get 15 minutes with these Hollywood studio executives. And we went around to the major studios. We went into Universal, and my agent puts in 60 Minutes, and I start telling Charlie Manson stories and talking about Corcoran, and these guys are like, whoa, right, whoa. So Universal Studios, Casey Silver, had what was called a discretionary fund, where he could basically greenlight projects. And he grabbed my project and bought it. And actually, Universal Studios then hired a screenwriter, a Hollywood screenwriter named David Chisholm, who's still a dear friend of mine. He's on my Facebook. And he came and stayed with me for a little bit, and he wrote a script called Judgment. So I told my wife, I'm like, hey, this movie might get made, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, they're investing. So David goes back with the script, and then 9/11 happens. And instead of my movie getting made, Casey Silver makes the movie Ladder 49, and then Geely with J-Lo, and it bombs. So I get my rights back. So now I got my rights.
It's right. Rights back again. You're like, yeah. All right, let's see. I paid $70,000 off of this. I could do this. This is
so now
your money.
I moved to Myrtle Beach. Michael Jackson is on trial in California, and the trial is in Los Angeles. And in California, we have one unit that has high-profile inmates. Like in that unit, we had Charles Manson, Sirhan, Juan Corona, Phil Spector. Anyone that's high profile would be in this unit. And many times I would work that unit, right? So I'm via satellite to Dave Abrams from Myrtle Beach being interviewed because the jury is out on Michael Jackson, and they're going to say innocence or guilt. So Michael Jackson is watching my interview with Dan Abrams, because Dan is interviewing me. If Michael's found guilty, Richard, he's coming to where you were. What is his daily routine going to be like? Well, I started going down the gamut of things. He's going to be showering in front of everybody. He's going to be having people try to befriend him, and and then the next day my phone rings, and it's MSNBC, and they said we have a Hollywood director who's trying to get a hold of you and wants to buy your rights. I'm like, no. I said, I've already done this Hollywood thing. I've already done the Hollywood thing. So they go, can we give him your phone number? Like, yeah, you can give it to him. So the next day, this guy calls me. His name is Rick Roman Wah. And he goes, Richard, my name is Rick, and I loved your story for 60 Minutes. I want to make a prison movie. I don't know anything about prisons. He goes, but your story is very intriguing. He goes, I said, stop right there. I said, I've already done the Hollywood thing. They don't ever get made. You guys buy the rights up and you put us on the shelf, and sometimes you keep them from other people. You buy them just to keep the stories. Yeah. He goes, Richard, I said, are you funded? He goes, no, I'm not funded. I said, so basically you want my story and you're going to shop it. He goes, well, I have people in other areas that are interested working in different studios that are going to look at it. You're going to shop it. He goes, basically, we're going to shop it. I said, if you talk to me, you come to the beach. Within 2 days, me and him are in a hotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And we have these white index cards, blank, laid out on the bed, like looking like a train, laid out, train tracks. And we're writing on these index cards scenes to an unnamed prison movie that is later called Felon. And I signed up with Rick for a year. We would talk 3-4 times a week for hours at night. I would educate him about the system.
And he's a director.
He's the director. So I'd educate him. I'd educate him about prison, Corcoran, my story. And then all of a sudden, about a year and a half later, I get a phone call one night and he goes, pack your shit. I'm like, what? He goes, pack your shit. He goes, I'm flying you out to New Mexico. We got funded by Sony. I'm like, what? I go, who's in the movie? He goes, Val Kilmer, Sam Shepard, Ann Archer. I go, what? I go, these are A-list actors. He said, he goes, they love your story. They're taking pay cuts. We're making Felon. It's happening. Get on a plane. You're coming out in at least 9 weeks. I need you by my side through the whole process. So I flew out to New Mexico. The Longest Yard just got done filming at the prison. They had it, so we bought the prison for 3 months to film. And we started filming Felon. I was there when there were just blank index cards, and he's the movie going to be about.
But so I always joke, if something happens in the aviation world, Brad Pitt plays me. You went. That's the guy that played you in the movie. I'm like, wait a minute, are we? That guy's not 6'4" and white and bald. What?
No, Hollywood, and they can do what they want. Once they have your story, basically, because I'm a public figure. You're a public figure. You got YouTube going on. You got your podcast. There's a lot of information out there on you, sir, and your military service, your civilian service. They can make a story about Lieutenant Colonel Taco Bell, the aviator, and not even need your approval based on what's out there in the world. And say it's just based. Yeah, they don't have to use your name. You can say, I know that's me, right? Yeah, I know that's me, and. So, I ended up I produced, I should have got a writer's credit because all the prison scenes I created. And I actually got in an argument one time with the director, Rick, on the set, because we were shooting a scene on the yard and Val Kilmer was out there, and he's Val Kilmer. He doesn't know how to act like an inmate or a convict. So I take him aside and I'm showing him, this is how I want you to walk. This is how I want you to posture. And then Rick looked at me and started yelling at me. He said, Richard, stop telling Val how to act. He goes, I'm the director on this set. And I looked at him and I said, you don't know shit about prisons. And I go, and I came right back at him, and all the staff and all the producers like, oh my God, I can't believe he's talking to the director like that. But what they don't realize is that me and Rick spent a year and a half basically co-writing the whole script, and it's my story. So then I was allowed to give guidance because I wasn't going to let something happen to where later on I would have correctional officers or staff say, there's no way that we did it like that. I have all these people now saying, man, it was just like that. And that's what I want. It's like being a pilot. You want it to be as factual as possible, for that other pilots come back and say, you know what, the way you land a plane on the Hudson happened just like that.
Yeah,
right?
so yeah, I was going to say Sully is probably one of the most realistic. The other movie that gets thrown to me is Flight with Denzel Washington. I go, no, no, we're not
Exactly.
blowing cocaine off some flight attendant's butt in the morning,
Exactly.
drunk, hungover,
Exactly.
showing up at the airport.
So basically, in my story, the amazing part of my story is the people that you think are the bad guys
Yeah,
end up protecting me and allowing me to exist in the most dangerous prison in America. And and I tell you how karma works, sir. We're talking this happened 94, 95, 96, 97, 98. They settled my lawsuit in 99. So for all those years, I'm wondering, is this my last day?
5 years. Wow.
Yes. So just like 4 years ago, so 2018, I'm in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
Okay. And I come across, I'm doing a thing for Prince Harry's charity for veterans. And I'm in the hood. You ever see the movie Training Day?
Yeah, yeah.
Remember when
Denzel Washington and yep.
Remember when the Mexican gang members have Ethan Hawke in the tub and they're going to kill him?
Yeah.
They pull that wallet out, and they said, "How did you get this wallet?" He goes,
That was his sister's wallet or
I
cousin or
I
something.
saved this woman and she was getting raped." Right? I'm in that same neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay, by myself, and Mexican mafia rolls up on me. This is karma coming knocking on the door right now. He comes rolling up on me, and I see the handprint of the Mexican mafia. I see the tattoo of the Mexican mafia. And he says, "Hey, Holmes, what are you doing in our neighborhood?" And I said, "I'm doing something for veterans." He's like, "Oh, right on." And I go, "You done time in Cali?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Me too." He goes, "Where?" I go, "Where were you at?" He goes, "Corcoran." I go, "Me too." He goes, "What's your name?" I go, "My name's Caruso." And sir, I didn't know what was going to happen. He came at me. And he came toward me. I didn't know if he was going to shank me. He grabbed me and he hugged me. He looks in my eyes and he goes, "Do you know what your name means in this neighborhood?" He goes, "Do you know the father and sons that you saved by stopping the violence at Corcoran that you saved in this neighborhood?" I said, "Can I videotape this?" And I videotaped it because nobody will believe that story.
Yeah.
And I videotaped it. And but that was karma. If I was a dirty cop, and I met him right there, all he would have to do is whistle. Over.
Yeah.
That was it. So I believe that, you might get away with something 99 times out of 100, but there's going to be that one time where you're going to have to answer to your conduct.
Right.
And when you do people wrong, or if you're out there in an authoritative position to where you're taking advantage of people, you might get away with it 99 out of 100 times, but there's going to be that one time where someone's going to roll on you and you're not going to see it coming. And sir, I can't tell you how many times I've had convicts approach me that I had in prison and just say, "Caruso, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for shining a light and stopping that violence." And even had cops. I've had cops on the street saying, "You know what? When we have that kind of crap going on, we pay for it. As good cops, we pay for it because they come out on the street and they're mad at us."
Right.
So I am not a sympathizer on crime, sir, and I want to make sure that that's understood. I'm against a corrupt system that allows it.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot of guts to be the whistleblower, to put your family through it. And how's your wife and kids nowadays?
Well,
I mean, they made it through no problem.
Me and my wife divorced after 17 years in 2007.
I'm sorry.
You're probably going to get mad at this, but my daughter, she was in the ROTC program here, and I'll tell you a little story. She loved her dad, the Marine, right? And she knew Daddy is just this badass Marine. And I would take her to Parris Island, and her senior year, I took her down to Parris Island, and heard they had ROTC recruits going through the Slide for Life.
Right.
So it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. The dew is up. I walk out with my daughter, and I'm in shorts, and she's in shorts, right? And I tell the drill instructor, I used to be stationed here, and this is my name. I showed him pictures of me back in the day. Can my daughter just watch these ROTC recruits? Oh yeah, come on up, right? So we're up there, and they have a nurse there for the ROTC recruits in case something happens. And this drill instructor is talking to me about back in the day. And I'm looking at the DI and I'm looking at my daughter and I'm feeling these bites on my legs, right? It's early in the morning and I feel my legs getting lit up by these sand fleas, right? And I know my daughter's legs are getting lit up, right? And I'm looking over at that nurse and I see this orange can, the top of an orange can out of her ditty bag, right? And I know that can is off, right? And my daughter's looking at me at the side of her eyes because the drill instructor talking proudly with me, right? And she's like looking at me like, don't do it, Dad. Don't do it. You're tough. You're a tough Marine. And I keep looking like down at her. And I said, hold on, Sergeant. I said, excuse me, ma'am. I said, can I have that off to spray on me, please? I go, I'm getting up real bad. And I start spraying my legs with the off. And all of a sudden I hand it to my daughter. And she just looks at me. She goes, I'm good, Dad. I'm good. She wouldn't take it. So instead of her going to the Marine Corps, she wanted to be Marine. I pushed her in the Air Force.
That's awesome.
And she's a master sergeant in the Air Force. She got 15 years in the United States Air Force. She'll retire in 4.5 years. And I'm very proud of her service. And
Master Sergeant, hats off to your daughter.
Thank you. Awesome. I basically travel the country and I do law enforcement advocacy. I do veteran advocacy. I reach out to these cops that are doing a hard job every day and support them. I reach out to veterans that are in dark places, knock them off the ledge. I use my whatever platform I have, whether it's you want to talk about movie, we'll talk about movie. You want to talk about Charles Manson, we can talk about Charles Manson. Whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah. I want to hear about old Charlie, man. I found a picture of him.
Right.
Look at that
that's
scary
Charlie.
Son of a bitch.
That's Charlie.
And you had your letter.
Yeah, that's a letter from him to me. Look at you. You're on top of it.
Yeah,
I use whatever platform is given to me to form that bridge. If I'm talking to gang members, I'll talk about leaders of gangs that they've only read in books that I know that I had. And then all of a sudden I got their attention and then I leave them with, hey, prison is not a way to go. These gangs are not a way to go. You either come up dead or doing time. And I try to talk to them and make a difference in their life. And I figure that, you know what, if I could touch one of them and change their mind about getting involved in that kind of lifestyle, then it's satisfying for me. And but you got to understand, sir, especially doing 29. You did 29 years in the Marine Corps?
Yeah, 29. Yeah, I couldn't take one more.
So much respect, sir. But these young kids in like Chicago, South Central Los Angeles, when you want to talk about PTSD, talk about walking to the neighborhood every day to school, seeing dead body here, drug addicts there, war zones, gunshots going off. You talk about PTSD and what these kids are dealing with, and their dads in prison, moms working 2 jobs, or moms got 3 kids from 3 different guys. They don't have that positive male role model in their life, and they crave it. They crave that positive male role model. Mm-hmm. And so where do they go for security? To the homeboys, to their gangs in the neighborhood, because they have to walk through them every day to survive.
Sure.
Now, when I get in prison, and I've got some of the toughest gang leaders, Monster Cody Scott, I started 8 Trade Gangsters. I've had some of the biggest name gang members in prison. And as a positive male role model, I'm giving them structure. Tuck your shirt in. Make your rack before you come out. Yes, officer. Yes, officer. And guess what? They're thriving in that structure. They're thriving. They want that structure.
Now, who was Val Kilmer supposed to be in real life? What was he? Who was he modeled off of?
We made that up because we needed an older inmate to kind of come in and mentor Porter. And the guards are based off real officers that I knew. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to give too much away of the movie because people that want to watch it.
Oh, they got to watch it and rent it tonight. It's only $3.50. Enjoy it. It's there's one part they mention a high celebrity prisoner coming in, and I figured they were referring to Charles Manson because I knew you had a relationship with him, but then they show Val Kilmer, so I figured they were
Charlie. If you look, if I'll send you a link when I get off the podcast. of the last 2 minutes of the movie when he's
Yeah.
walking out. And if you look real close, there's an inmate looking out at Porter as he's walking. And he's got a swastika on his forehead. And we made him Charles Manson. But the high profile was Val that had killed, the gang members that killed his wife. But, Charles Manson basically was state raised. I mean, as a child, Charlie grew up in Ohio, and his mother was a prostitute, gave him away for drugs. He went in the juvenile system, petty crimes, got in the juvenile system. He's a little guy. He was preyed upon, sexually assaulted, raped in juvenile prison. Then he got in the adult prison and learned how to be a convict and learned how to talk the talk and walk the walk. And then once he became state raised and had that convict mentality, I kind of compare him to like BLM, Black Lives Matter, where they're spewing that hatred in these colleges and on the streets, and these young kids are sucking it up. And Charlie went down to Haight-Ashbury spewing that crap, and they grabbed. It's the same kind of thing. So,
who did he associate with in prison? He's got a swastika, so
right.
Is he kind of like the Aryan Brotherhood guy or grandfather?
If you look at Charlie's crime, he tried to start a race war by pitting blacks against whites. He wanted to blame the LaBianca and the Tate murders on the blacks to start a war. But Charlie was basically in protective custody most of the time while he was in prison because everybody wanted to have that notoriety. I killed Charles Manson.
Street cred, sure.
Street cred. But this is the ironic thing. You're going to listen to this. This is the ironic thing. So it's 1993. I'm on the yard in the shoe. Charlie's down there below me. I'm 15 feet above him. So for 3 hours, he's got nobody to talk to but me. Right? And he tells me, he goes, my son died today, killed himself. And I'm like, I said, I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't know if he was using that as a manipulative tool for me to get sympathy off me. So I brushed it aside. Right. I got so many Charles Manson stories, right? But this is just one of them. So I brushed it aside, sir. And I went on and, I dealt with Charlie over the years. And now fast forward 1993, 39 years later, 37 years later, 3 years later, I connect with this guy named Jason Freeman. Right? Charlie dies at Corcoran in 2017. He died. You got all these people coming out of the woodwork wanting to get his body because they want to have the legal right to that Manson name for merchandise and everything else. So the courts put Charlie on ice to say, okay, well, you people say you're next of kin. We need documentation and DNA. So they did that. And the only one that was linked to Charlie, the DNA and documentation, the clear path, was this young man named Jason Freeman, right? So Jason and I get together. He finds out I was taking care of his grandfather. He does his research. He watches Felon. He does his research on me. So we started becoming friends to where I would tell stories about it because he never met his grandfather. He talked to him on the phone towards the end of his life. He's got his grandfather's ashes, right? So I'm telling him about his grandfather and, how, time spent with his grandfather. And so throughout the years, we formed a friendship. 3 weeks ago, I'm down in Sarasota, Florida. I'm doing a thing with a nonprofit called Team 1 Mile. We have 15 to 17 cyclists that are cycling from Key West to Jacksonville, 700 miles in 6 days. And we're raising $60,000 to distribute throughout those 6 days to veterans that were in need that lost in the hurricane. I'm in Sarasota, Florida, and I feel this guy come up to me and he gives me a big hug from behind. And guess who it was?
That was Jason?
Charles Manson's grandson. And he comes up and hugs me. He's like, Rich. And this is the first time we met and we hugged. And my team members, I got NFL players on my team, pro athletes, pro cyclists, just A-list people that are on that team, right? They all embrace him and they bring him in, realizing he's not responsible for what Charlie did. He's had to live under the burden of that Manson name. His father killed himself over that burden. So after all these years of dismissing Charlie about Jason's father killing himself, God has brought that guy's son to me in Sarasota, and I'm standing there with the son of his dad. I brushed it away. And now together we have embraced Jason. We put him on our team to go with us the next time to shake hands and hug necks. He does Christian ministry, and he's out there doing a good thing now. He doesn't, he's out giving back to his community. He's a Christian with a family, and he's telling his story about how it was growing up under pressure. That last name being Manson.
Wow. Charlie, how did he even he was young when he committed the murders in the 60s. So was this a love child that?
Well, what I tell Jason is, I said, it's good that, Jason's father was Charles Manson Jr. Okay. But there's no doubt I've been to the ranch. I got pictures I'll send you. I've been out there to the Sun Ranch. There's no, on my mind, Charlie's got other babies out there from those girls, right? Whether they can prove it in documentation, that's the key. But Jason's father was Charles Manson Jr., so he had that direct paperwork and bloodline, Charlie. That's why but for it to come full circle to where I dismissed it, and then 38 years later, this guy's hugging me from behind, and I know about his father killing himself, and I brushed it away 38 years ago. Now I'm loving on this young man, realizing the burden he's carried all these years, and together we're out there in the world making a difference, trying to do good.
Well, how did Charlie die?
I don't know if he had some kind of cancer, but he had an illness.
The
Mexican Mafia, when he was in Vacaville, the Mexican Mafia tried to set him on fire. They threw, I don't know if it was baby oil or lighter fluid on him. They tried to set him on fire. People had tried to kill him, and that's why we had to keep him in protective custody. But
so if he's in protective custody, he's by himself.
No, well,
it's like solitary.
But people can still get to you. I can give you another Manson story.
Yeah,
if you're Well, in one of the units in which that I had Charlie, in one of the sections in that section you had 20 cells. Okay, you had 10 on the top and 10 on the bottom. Okay, there's no activity in the day room. These are locked up 24 hours a day. Okay. On the top, we had HIV inmates. Okay. On the bottom, we had some of our high profile inmates. Okay. Like Charlie, if I yell through the door, Charlie, you want to go to yard? And he might say, yes, I want to go to yard. Whenever he saw me come into work, he would do this. He knew as a Marine, he put a cone on his head, like a dunce cone. And he'd go like this. And then he would salute me because he knew I was a Marine, and I'd salute him back. Right. So I said, Charlie, I go, you want to go to yard? He goes, yeah, I want to go to yard. So I said, crack 12, right? So they'd open up his cell. Now Charlie's going to come out with his shower shoes. He's going to be in his underwear, and he's going to come down to the door with his soap. He's supposed to walk straight to me, right? And hand everything through the hole in the door, and I'll search his property, and then I'll do an unclothed body search through the door on him. Lift your arms, lift your mouth, lift your
over.
Spread your butt cheeks. Let me look up your ass. Sometimes I get him pissed off. I'd say, okay, now lift your testicles. He lift his testicles. And I say, now open your mouth. He'd open his mouth. I said, take your finger, run it through your mouth. His finger would be in his mouth. I said, didn't you just have your finger on your penis? He goes, God damn. He gets so mad at me, right? He gets so mad at me. So this time he's walking to me to the door, and there's two black inmates up there in the top tier in the corner. And you hear them going, Charlie, come up here for a minute. So Charlie looks up at him, and he starts walking up the stairs. I go, no, get down here right now. Do not go up there, right? He goes, no, Paisan. He goes, I got this. He goes, I'm going to go up and see what they want. I said, Charlie, get down here, right? And so he ignores what I'm telling him, and he goes up there, and they're talking to Charlie through the cell door. And they go, Charlie, can you give this National Geographic to our homeboys on the bottom tier? And Manson reaches down to get the magazine slid under the door. And when he goes to do that, they throw HIV piss and shit all over him, right? And now he's got HIV piss and shit all over him, and he starts screaming, right? I'm like, get your ass down here to the door. I got to put on a hazmat suit now. I got a hazmat suit on, and I'm cuffing him up to the door. He's in handcuffs, and he's got all this urine and crap on him, and I'm taking him out to the yard, and I throw him in the corner. He goes, "I'm going to kill them, Caruso. I'm going to kill them." And I throw him in the yard, and I get the hose out, and I'm hosing him off. I said, "Charlie, you're going to have AIDS now." This is when AIDS just came out.
Yeah.
I go, "You got?" I go, "That's HIV." And he goes, "I'm going to kill them, Caruso. I'm going to kill them." I go, "I told you not to go up there, right?" So I get him all cleaned off. I put him back in his cell, and I know that something's going to happen. He's going to retaliate. So about 3 weeks later, I come into work. I look up at the black 2 inmates from the corner, the HIV inmates, and I see that there's a Muslim chaplain up there administering the word through the cell door to the 2 blacks, right? So, he's got a vest on, and he gets done. He starts walking down the stairs, heading out the unit. All of a sudden, you hear, "Father, Father." And the Muslim chaplain turns around and goes, "What do you want, Mr. Manson?" He goes, "Can you come here for a minute?" So the Muslim chaplain goes walking over to Charlie's cell, and he goes, "What do you want, Mr. Manson?" Charlie throws shit and piss all over the Muslim chaplain.
Did they call that getting flamed? Did they call that getting flamed? Because when we were in Afghanistan walking through the prison, the guys would take the piss and crap and
mix
then
it together, yeah.
mix it together and then put it in a toilet toilet paper, and then get it wet, piss on it, and then try to throw it through the wiring up at us. When you're in flight suits and stuff like that with no name tags on. But yeah,
sir, were you involved in any of that? Where they took the pictures of the Taliban or any of the terrorists that were getting abused over there?
You're talking about Iraq?
Yeah.
Abu Ghraib? No.
Yeah.
No, in Afghanistan, when I went back, it was a 30-day prison corrections tour that President Obama had put General Doug Stone on. And I was what would you say I was? Advanced party guy. So I set up all the trips, all the lodging, transportation, stuff like that. But we got to go visit. We had to sign. I mean, it was a bunch of documents. 2008, so I'm sure all that stuff's gone now because we gave up Afghanistan. But yeah, we had to sign NDAs not to divulge who we talked to, who we met, who we saw, the whole 9 yards. It was a very interesting 30 days. Let's put it that way.
Well, let me ask you this, and I had this conversation with a doctor friend of mine recently here. Because like you and others, he was intrigued with my story. And I said, "Doc," I said, what if you were working in an emergency room and you had this 82-year-old man and he had maybe 3 months to live and it wasn't going to be quality life, and you had another doctor in there without going to the family, kind of just put him to sleep quietly and gave him some dignity? Would you tell that doctor that he's not God and he can't do that? Would you go to the administration and expose him if he ignored you? Would you go to the family and expose them? He goes, "If I did, I would not have a job." And Richard, it happens all the time in our hospitals. So I'm asking you, sir, if you would have saw what I saw, there's certain things that we could turn our head to. There has to be a gray area that they have to, anybody in the home as a child, you have to fear consequences for bad behavior. Mm-hmm. So in the world that we live in, if there's no fear of bad behavior, then you're going to have the inmates running the asylum. So, but unfortunately, some people can't exist within that gray area and they go overboard. If you saw some of the things that I've described, what would you have done?
That's tough. That's not my job. I mean, the environment is everything, and the respect that you showed those guys in that situation. I saw guards who were respectful and they were treated with respect. But I could also see where somebody would get flamed a lot because the level of respect from the prisoners that were in there was none. So those guys.
What if you had a commanding officer that was a friend of yours and he confided in you that, say there was one that the officers went overboard and they beat him to death, but we covered it up with paperwork, and he confided that in you?
Yeah, how are you? That's not going to work.
You would tell them that's not going to work, and you would report it to your supervisor, or would you just say don't talk about this again?
You know, that's
And that's what I was dealing with. You're
that
talking
that's
you're
yeah,
talking with
that's
a
a
higher
really hard
power.
deal because do you have the evidence to back it up? Do you have, in your case, you had the evidence, but if it's just hearsay, somebody's telling me something, you know, to do the right thing, yeah, contact NCIS, but then who is actually colluding with them? You don't know. It would definitely be a lay awake at night with a lot of things. I mean, we put a lot of those scenarios on our Marines. We we have training camps where the platoon kind of along the same lines. We take school teachers and we send them to Quantico or we send them to Paris, not Paris Island, but out to San Diego or Paris Island for educator workshops. Well, at Quantico, what we did was we put the educators, and we have a lot of them that are very liberal minded, maybe. And when you put them on point, or you put them in charge of a squad, and they're walking through the woods, and all of a sudden an explosion goes off, and this guy has got all the mooge, blood and guts and stuff, and he comes running up, and the educator has an M16 with blanks in it, and sitting there going, "Stop! Stop! Stop! Don't come any further! Stop! Stop! Stop!" Because you give them a big brief beforehand about rules of engagement, what you can, what you can't do, and how you can handle locals and the whole nine yards. Half of it, I think they forget why they're drinking their coffee. But this particular case, the guy shot the guy, and the actor, the Marine, drops dead. He just got shot, and he drops dead, and he's got little blood packs. And then the educator goes, "Okay, everyone, move out," and you step over the body. And then when we pull the guy in after the exercise in front of everybody, we're like, well, first of all, why did you shoot that guy? Well, because he didn't obey my commands. He's running at me, screaming. And there were reports of people with suicide vests on. And the guy could have blown up my entire squad of Marines.
But what is he doing right there? He's articulating the threat.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what he perceived as a threat.
Right.
But then you turn around and you go, yeah, but the guy had blood coming down his ears. So perhaps his eardrums are ruptured. He doesn't understand English. He can't hear anything except, the ringing of the explosion. And you just killed an innocent guy. You're going to jail.
But those seconds that he's going to, those seconds you're asking him to notice that is going to cost him his life.
It's a hard decision, but that was part of the whole exercise to show, it's easy to judge something from the sideline or the next morning quarterback it, but we are putting 19 and 20-year-old kids in that situation for 20 years in the war, having to make life or death decisions. Every single day, those guys and girls were making life or death decisions. And we trained them well enough to do that. Now, did they make mistakes? Yeah, people would make mistakes. And a lot of them were exposed. Were we hypersensitive to the point that I interviewed a Marine who was he was a MARSOC, and he's part of the MARSOC 7. And Fred got basically the bad guys, after they got into an ambush, the bad guys went and told everyone that the Marines were drunk and had dismounted and shot everybody. So who did they believe? Did they believe the Marines that said, that's not what happened at all? We rolled in, they attacked us, we fought back, we rolled through the ambush. No, they put all these guys on trial. They found them not guilty, but they ruined their lives in the whole nine yards. So you kind of get to a point where does it work? That's a good question.
What about if you're walking through a ville in Vietnam and you see babies getting killed, and you're thinking, you know what, this is wrong? Would you have stopped? Or would you?
Yeah, of course. You have to.
But then you step back, as like you say, Monday quarterback, and you see so many that didn't stop it. And like you said earlier, it's because we're programmed to think that this is war. This is what happens.
Well, you think that, but when you look at, we created the Summer Leadership Character Development Academy for high school students. And that was the last thing that my project I had as an officer in the Marine Corps. And it was, every tenet was around character development, leadership. We took them to the Holocaust Museum, and we took them through the whole tour in DC of the Holocaust Museum. And then we go into an auditorium. We have 100 high school students, and we bring up Sal, who talks about when he was a kid, and you got the tattoo on his arm. One of the things that we told the kids, we go, that was so long ago, it's so out of your area, but what if one general had stood up to Hitler and said, you know, boss, I love you, but my wife is Jewish. So are we going to kill my wife and kids because they've got Jewish blood? You know, had one person stood up to the guy, that wouldn't have happened. And you go, well, that was so long ago. No, no, no. Modern day, the football players, they were Pennsylvania, or I think it was Pennsylvania. They had the two football players, the quarterback and the star running back. I mean, these kids were destined for college, NFL. And they were at a high school party on a Friday night, and the quarterback decides, you know, this girl's passed out and he's going to rape this girl. And he and this buddy dragged this girl through the party and took her in the back bedroom, and they raped her. And not only that, but the idiots filmed it on social media. So their lives, they're in jail forever. What kid stopped what they were doing and said, hey, whoa, 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 time out. I know that girl. I'm in math class with that girl. Don't do this. She's a great girl. Do not do this. Did one kid have the balls to stand up to those guys? No. They would have gotten their ass handed to them. But as I tell,
peer pressure.
Right. But I told all the kids, all 100 of them, I go, you need to be that general that stands up and opposes the thing. You need to be the kid that's willing to get your ass kicked by the entire football team, drunk football team at a party, to stop this happening to a girl that you don't even really know that well. But you got to have that moral compass and that standard to do it. So to answer your question, yes, you have to turn the situation in, and you got to do it. So if you're asking me if I would do it, yes, I would do it. If you're asking me, do I condone what you did, in 100%, yes. So that's why I'm a big fan of yours.
I appreciate that.
It takes a lot of courage to put yourself and your family through to make something right. You know, good on you, because not a lot of people do that, Rich.
But God constantly is bringing good things across my path, and I'm not a Bible thumper, but I do believe in God, and I try to, you know, do right, and I'm not perfect. You know, I'm as flawed as the next person, but bringing people like yourself, sir, Marine Major General Lott, Mike Campbell, the head of Team 1 Mile, Don Davey, another teammate. Constantly, I was penniless when they were trying to starve me out. You know, my law enforcement career was over with. I put myself through a 6-month post academy. I paid for it, and God just kept bringing people in my path to kind of look out for me or show interest in me and steady me. And when I would fall, they would steady me and kick me back out there into the world and said, make a difference, you know. And I'm up in Michigan, in St. Clair, Michigan, sitting on the water with a 2-star Marine Corps general. He's asked me to come to his house. I'm like, why does it? So I go up there, and we're sitting by the water, and I said, sir, why is a Marine corporal sitting here with a 2-star general? He said, well, let's just get one thing straight. You know, we're Marines. He goes, put rank aside, we're Marines. He said, but what you did in California and what I see in the prosecutorial work, that these prosecutors are not held accountable for some of the cases they bring against people, and they have no one to answer to. He had more respect for what I did in California than basically almost me being a Marine. And basically he's taking me under his wing, and, you know, he'll be the first one to raise his hand for me. And he knows I'm not perfect. He knows I make mistakes, but he steadies me, and he pushes me back out there in the world. And, you know, yourself, sir, and, you know, a lot of great leaders, a lot of sergeant majors and master gunnery sergeants invite me to the retirements. And I'm like, I'm just a corporal that did 4. He goes, no, no, no. He goes, what you did, Richard, is it took a lot of courage to stand up. So to have that respect and that stamp of approval and that thumbs up from men like yourself to say, Richard, I'd like to have you come on my podcast. Like I said on my post today, it's been such an honor to be able to come on here and share with you, because, you know, you are the creme de la creme as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, all 10 fans of the show, man, they appreciate that, dude.
No, but for you to invite me on your show and use your forum for 2 hours to share my story, I thank you so much. And
no, your time's valuable, but it's incredible to me. Now, I want to go back and finish up. Last question. Did any of those asshats get frog marched out of the prison for what they did? Did any of the bad apples ever get cut?
So let me tell you, let me finish the story with the feds in the state, okay?
Yeah.
So for years, I'm stealing stuff out for the FBI, right? And I'm tape recording everybody that calls me. I'm tape recording them. And nobody's getting indicted. I'm on 60 Minutes. I'm on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle. I'm on the front page of the LA Times. I'm in the U.S. Attorney's office. He picks up the U.S. attorney that is handling this case that I'm stealing this stuff for, picks up the paper and slams it on the desk and says, no more media, Richard. No more damn media. And I'm saying to myself, why is he upset at me for talking to the media, right? Well, the reason he's upset is because there's 5 prisons around this federal courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Voir dire is going to be picked. The jury is going to be picked from the community around this federal courthouse as Copland. So he knows this case is the no-win case.
Right.
Okay. So, but what the media, it was 60 Minutes and the LA Times and the San Francisco Chronicle and the Fresno Bee, they're putting pressure on the U.S. attorney. You got to do something. It's obvious what's going on here. So they do an investigation. They spend millions of dollars based on what I said and Lieutenant Riggs said and some of the other administrative people that came forward said. So they spend $1 million, the state, on an investigation way after the fact of what we gave the FBI, right?
Mm-hmm.
The FBI is conducting a separate investigation. These people, these 2 entities are not working together, okay?
Sure.
In the beginning, on my front yard, when I handed over the evidence, the pendulum was way over here, right? To do the right thing, the FBI. Over the years, politics started playing and the pendulum started swinging. So I find out the U.S. attorney and the 2 FBI agents that were in that car with me, they want me to meet with them 5 years later, in my civil attorney's office in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Word has come down, they're going to indict these officers, right? So my wife and I are like, it's finally over. They're going to do it. They're going to indict. So we go to I file a civil lawsuit against the state of California. They want me to retire, and I'm saying there's no need for me to retire for doing the right thing, right? They're saying they're sending me to a state psychiatrist, hoping the state psychiatrist he's unfit for duty. The state psychiatrist, which is basically a hired gun for the Department of Corrections,
right,
comes back and says, there's nothing wrong with him. Just put him outside the wall until the trial's over with. They're saying we don't have correctional officer positions outside the wall. Well, they do. They have outside crews, the academy, court. They just wanted me to retire, go away, right? Quit stealing stuff, right? So we get word I have to go to my civil attorney's office. I filed a civil lawsuit against the state of California, against the Department of Corrections. I testified in front of the Senate. All this stuff comes out. We have an election. I stepped up for Democrats. We changed the system. I'm a Republican. And so a Democratic governor gets appointed, Gray Davis, right? Mm-hmm. I go to San Francisco. I walk in my attorney's office, and there's the U.S. attorney that I've been feeding stuff for 5 years, right? And the 2 agents that were in the car with me when we were getting chased. And I sit down, and the U.S. attorney sits across from me. Richard, you know we've been doing our investigation. The state's been doing their investigation, but we got a problem. I go, we have a problem. 5 years in, we have a problem. He said, the state Department of Corrections has sent us a memo saying that you sent a child molester out there on that yard one day and you shot him with the blocks because he was a child molester. I'm like, what? I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? I go, you're going to believe a memo from the Department of Corrections? You don't see they're trying to muddy me because I'm going to be the witness? He looks at me, sir. The U.S. attorney that I've been dealing with, stealing with for, and putting my life on a day every day, he goes, I'm going to offer you 3 to 5 years in a federal prison.
Nice try. No.
If you plead guilty to this, I'm going to offer you 3 to 5 years. That's the deal. Shuts his book. They walk out, and my attorneys are looking at me like, what just happened? And my attorney goes, you know what just happened? They're now in bed with the state. They're going to indict those officers, and they're telling the state, but we'll get Caruso, right?
Yeah.
Quid pro quo. So what happens, I go home. I have all these tapes of the FBI saying you've never been the focus of an investigation. I would have thrown everything in the garbage, Richard. I would have never done what you did. You're a hero, Richard. I have all these, right? And my attorney says, I have a friend, Harold Rosenthal, works with Barry Scheck in California, a high-priced attorney. He goes, Richard, he goes, we're going to let you go talk to him. So I talked to him, and he goes, you have all those conversations on tapes? I said, yes. He goes, bring me those tapes. He goes, it's going to cost you $10,000. He goes, I'm going to listen to these tapes. I go, I don't have $10,000. I'm broke, right? So I go, credit card is a $10,000 credit card. He listens to the tapes. He arranges a meeting with the FBI and the U.S. attorney. He goes to Fresno. My attorney walks in there, Harold Rosenthal, and he starts looking at the U.S. attorney and starts speaking verbatim what they told me. Didn't you tell my client he was a hero? Didn't you say you would have thrown it all in the garbage and never turned it over? And then they realize, oh shit, Caruso taped us. So they asked my attorney to step out. He steps out. The U.S. attorney comes out and says, Richard, we're not gonna indict Richard. And my attorney said, you're goddamn right. That kid did nothing wrong. So they indict the officers, right?
Yeah.
Big press, they're indicted. In the meantime, I'm living in Napa, California. I'm getting ready to retire from the department. I'm going through a police academy. I'm putting myself through a police academy, 6-month full-time police academy, right? And but I get a call from the governor's office, Governor Gray Davis's office. It says, Richard Caruso, I'm Governor Davis's aide, and because of what you did for coming up and testifying for the senators and changing the department, Governor Davis has ordered the Department of Corrections to settle your civil lawsuit. I'm like, what? He goes, Governor Davis has not only ordered the Department of Corrections to settle your civil lawsuit, but he have his personal attorney sitting with your attorneys in mediation against the department next month to settle your lawsuit. I'm like, wow. Wow. So all of a sudden we go to the Pyramid Building in San Francisco. For 2 years, these 7 attorneys from the Department of Corrections have said, he's a piece of shit. He's stealing stuff. Don't believe him, right? Now they're looking at me like, that little son of a bitch can pick up the phone to Governor Davis, right? I can't believe it, right? So they're throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars back and forth. And I'm just sitting there saying, no, that's not
1.5 million, please. How about 2 million?
Work. They said he doesn't deserve anything else. He gets his benefits, he gets his retirement. Yeah, he did what he did, but that's all he deserves. My attorney end up and tell the judge, Your Honor, this kid's been a cop since he's been 18 years in the Marine Corps, 18 years old. Why should he have to get a Burger King uniform now? Because he did the right thing and exposed a dirty system. And then they sent me off into 2 rooms. They came in with a number, and I said, no, that's not going to work. And I said, I wrote a number on a piece of paper that I wanted to clear after I paid my attorneys. And they said, well, we're going to have to call the governor to get that clearance. So they call the governor, and the governor says, put Caruso on the phone. And I get on the phone, and he goes, Richard, I just want to thank you for what you've done, for shining a light on the system and changing the system. Take this money, go on with your life, and don't rub our face in it every chance you can. I want to make you whole, Richard. I started crying. It was over. And I took the deal. I took the settlement because I realized that, you know what if I go in front of a jury and they only give me $700,000, knowing that my attorney could take 33 and a third of that. I said,
Right.
I want to clear over $1 million. I go,
Yeah.
when I walk away from this, I want over $1 million. So he gives me the largest settlement ever given to a whistleblower in the state of California.
Yeah.
I go back to Napa. I'm in the gym at Old's Gym. I come home and there's a white car sitting outside my house. I come out, state agent pops out. FBI pops out. FBI. I go, I know who you are. He goes, Richard, we're getting ready to have the trial in Fresno. We need you. I go, are you kidding me? I go, you just offered me 3 to 5 years in federal prison saying I was dirty. I go, they just gave me the Department of Corrections that said I was dirty, just gave me the largest settlement ever given to a whistleblower in the state of California. He goes, we shouldn't have believed them. We shouldn't have believed them. I go, you know what? I go, you have my grand jury testimony. I'm not coming down to that circus. I go, I already saw in the paper where they're putting people on the jury whose family members work at Corcoran. I go, there's no way there's going to be a conviction, right? He said, well, we're gonna subpoena you. I said, you do what you want to do. So I go in and I call the CBS evening newsroom and I asked for Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace at 60 Minutes had my back all the way through. So Mike gets on the phone. I said, Mike, can you believe they tried to put me in jail? Now they see the department gave me the settlement and realized they got duped and they want me to go get back in bed with them. And he said, Richard, you started this ball rolling. He said, you need to go down and do the right thing and follow through with this. 60 Minutes will be in the front row holding people accountable. I said, Mike, it's going to be a joke. So I said, you know, I'll come down. So I pull down. I pull up to the trial, to the federal courthouse. As soon as I step out of the car, cameras, click, 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 as I'm walking in. I get in there, and I go through security, and the defense attorneys see me getting ready to come in the courtroom, and they ask for a sidebar. They want to have a private talk with the judge because they know the department that says don't believe Caruso just gave him $1.7 million, right? Wow. So they take me in a room and they said, Rich, the defense says, wanted the judge, if you bring up $1.7 million, the defense is going to ask for a mistrial. But the judge told the defense, if you talk about money, Mr. Caruso and the U.S. attorney can follow up. So that was the deal. They said, Richard, you can't bring up your settlement when you're on the stand. I said, I can bring it up. So I get there on the stand, and what happens? They open, the defense attorney opens up with a Paramount Pictures contract, and he's holding it in front of my face, and he's showing the jury, and he says, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is all about a movie. This is a movie that was created in Mr. Caruso's head. All this stuff, high-speed chase, Richard, high-speed chase, we're chasing you. This is all about a movie, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm sitting there saying, oh, geez, we got the FBI sitting right here. They're going to back me, right?
Right.
Because I've had Mike Wallace and LA Times listen to the FBI on tape talking about that high-speed chase, right? So all of a sudden he says, Richard, how much this Paramount Pictures going to give you? Read that number right there if this movie gets made. He said about $780,000. He goes, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, $780,000. Richard, that's probably more money than you've ever made. I looked at the jury and said, no, they gave me more about a month ago over there. And he realized he messed up. And Mike Wallace is waiting for the U.S. attorney. Stand up and tell the jury, what does Richard mean by that? Stand up and tell them that those just gave him $1.7 million, right? And the U.S. attorney never stands up. So the press sees they're throwing this case. They don't want the jury to know. So I get off the stand, and the defense attorney says, we're going to put the FBI on the stand tomorrow, and they're going to tell you there was no high-speed chase, right? I go back to Napa. I'm looking for the headlines the next day. The next day it says high-speed chase never happened. They get FBI, the two FBI agents on the stand. The one female says, were you being followed? And she said, we were being followed. Were you speeding up to 90 miles? She goes, well, you know, my partner drives fast. She minimized it, right?
Right.
But Mike Wallace And the LA Times heard her saying, oh my God, I can't believe how unprofessional they were. We were scared. They were chasing us. So they're sitting there knowing the FBI's lying, right?
Yeah.
So she gets off the stand, and Mark Arax from the LA Times goes up to her and confronts her and says, you're lying. I heard you on tape tell Richard Caruso you were being chased. Well, right then, she had already known I had tapes from before. Right then, she realized Caruso has tape recorded me, and she scurries away. So I called the U.S. attorney when I find this out, that they let them lie on the stand. And I lit the U.S. attorney up on the voicemail. I said, I knew I couldn't trust you. I knew that after you tried to put me in jail 5 years, that still I'm trying to do the right thing and testify for you guys. You're all dirty. The department's dirty. The feds are dirty. You're all dirty. The only clean people are the guys working the line. We're the only clean ones. And so he writes me this huge letter. And he calls me a hero. He says, without you, Richard Caruso, none of this would have happened. And he says, in regards to the high-speed chase, two people can be at the same place at the same time with different accounts and both be telling the truth. And I said, are you kidding me? Somebody perjured themselves on that stand. And the feds threw the case, and I was going through the roof. And then Mike Wallace calmed me down and said, Richard, what was your goal? I said, my goal was to stop the violence. He goes, Richard, the violence has stopped. It wasn't about convicting these officers. By them paying you that money, Richard, they're admitting your story is true. And by the violence stopping, why are more body bags being brought out of Corcoran State Prison? Because your story was true. And that's what happened with the bad guys. They ended up getting off. But in the long run, did they really get off because God's watching the whole thing?
Yeah. Yeah. But they're still there at work, right?
No, they've retired and some went out on medical. But none of them did jail time. But the violence stopped.
Yeah.
Only because we shine a light on it.
Yeah. Well, sometimes light's the best disinfectant, as they say, right? Well, dude, that was a hell of a story. That was 2 hours, and I've got a great friend, Kevin Meckler. He's a Marine, and he wanted to let you know, Rich, what a great ministry. So
I'm honored. I'm honored. Let me just say this: if I didn't have the support of my peers and being as a whistleblower, what I was up against. You ever see the movie The Insider with Al Pacino?
Yeah. Okay.
Al Pacino plays in that movie a guy by the name of Lowell Bergman, who was a producer for 60 Minutes. When 60 Minutes came out to do my piece in California, Lowell Bergman knocked on my door and said, Richard Caruso, I know who you are, and I want to tell your story to the world. So then Mike Wallace flew out. After I spent a week with Lowell, Mike Wallace flies out, and Mike and Lowell are not talking much. They're nice to me, but they're really not, and I don't know what's going on, right? So Mike promises me, we got your back. We got your back. So I said, Mike, my dad is in his 80s. He lives in New York. I said, he doesn't have much time left, and he's worried to death about me. It was 11 o'clock at night. Mike goes, let's go to the payphone. Get your dad on the phone. I call New York from California. My dad's tired. He wakes up, dead sleep, and he goes, hello. And Mike grabs the phone. He goes, Angie. He goes, who's this? He goes, this is Mike Wallace. My dad goes, bullshit. He goes, this is Mike. He goes, this is Mike Wallace. I'm with your son. And he goes, I'm going to let you know that 60 Minutes is going to have his back all the way through, and we're going to watch over him. And he put my dad's mind at ease. So I totally respected him for that. Right?
Yeah.
So I couldn't figure why they're not talking as we're shooting my piece. So after we get the piece in the can, I'm expecting it to show on 60 Minutes in about a month. It's not showing. So I get a call from the San Francisco Chronicle. A reporter calls me and said, Richard, 60 Minutes and Don Hewitt and Mike Wallace are mad at Lowell Bergman because Lowell Bergman went to the New York Daily News and exposed them over Jeffrey Wigbaum in the tobacco industry of 60 Minutes not wanting to run that story. I'm like, what? He goes, they're not going to run Lowell's last piece, which is yours, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. I call the CBS Evening Newsroom. I go to speak to Mike Wallace. They go, who's this? That's Richard Caruso. I said, just a minute. Mike gets on the phone. He goes, Richard, how you doing? I said, Mr. Wallace, let's stop that. I go, you promised me, you promised my father you would have my back. How come my piece isn't running? He goes, oh, we're still editing. I go, stop, Mr. Wallace, stop. I know that you and Don Hewitt are mad at Lowell Bergman. I know that you're not going to run my piece just to get Lowell. You're going to use me. And I'm going to tell you what, you need to go talk to Don Hewitt right now because I got to call in the Dateline. I'm going to expose 60 Minutes and what you're doing to Lowell Bergman. And Mike goes, I'll call you right back, Richard. He goes in and talks to the head of 60 Minutes, Don Hewitt, and tells my threat. He calls me back and says, Richard, we're going to run it this weekend. So then they make the movie The Insider. They make the movie The Insider, and it all comes out how Lowell walks away from 60 Minutes, but mine was the last piece. And the only reason they ran it is because I threatened them.
Oh, my God, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's and truth is stranger than fiction sometimes, right?
Yes, sir.
Out of all the prison movies you watched, which one is your favorite and why? Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile.
What civilian airlines do you work for?
A big one.
That starts with an A?
Starts with an A, yeah.
Okay, what is your favorite airlines to fly? The one that starts with an A?
Starts with an A, yeah.
So the one, my favorite prison movie starts with an F. It's Felon.
Yeah, I know. But aside from that, I sit in a hotel room and there are remote drops, okay? If I turn the TV on, it's TBS or TNT or whatever, and you know they're going to have an hour and a half of commercials for this movie, I'm going to watch and drop The Green Mile, and and Shawshank Redemption.
Love it.
I love those two movies. I don't know why. It's just redemption.
I like Cool Hand Luke. I like American Me because I had those guys in my unit.
Yeah.
Shawshank. I like Shawshank. I like The Green Mile. But I mean, Felon, I'm proud to say that I've done searches, and Felon has been rated one of the top prison movies ever made. And also, if you look at IMDb, I think we have like 7.5 stars out of 10. So I take pride in the feedback from the public. And when I got a Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel legend that gives me a thumbs up that says, Richard, I like that movie. I mean, so when I get that positive feedback, I mean, to me, I'm very proud of it. But let me just say, once I want to get back to me as a whistleblower, I had the power of the media. I spoke at Cal Berkeley at a journalist class, and
back when they were journalists.
Yeah, back when they were journalists. So this class had already been studying my case for 3 weeks, so they knew about me before I came in there. And actually, it was Lowell Bergman's class. He was the professor. And Lowell always told me, don't pick a fight with a person that has a barrel of ink. And that's what it did, is that I have the power of the press, the power of media, that by picking a fight with me, the media came to my aid and kept defending me. And eventually the department gave up. So I tell people, there's people out there wanting to do the right thing in small town USA or that don't have the media coverage that I do, and they get consumed. They kill themselves. They can't handle the stress because they get starved out for trying to do the right thing. And my heart goes out to those whistleblowers or those people that have integrity because they don't have the protection that I had. Yep. They're out there on an island, and usually it doesn't turn out good for them.
Yeah. Well, crazy. Listen, I've had you on for 2.5 hours, and I can't thank you enough, brother. We got to drop off, and I'm going to hit commercial here. Everybody, Richard Caruso, Marine, police officer, corrections god, Felon. Go watch Felon. It's gonna be impressive. Richard,
sure.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for everything.
And I will definitely catch you. We're gonna keep in touch here. I've got something.
Can I just say, anyone out there watching, please follow team1mile.com.
Yeah.
We're out there in the world shaking hands and hugging necks, and we're trying to help out people that are broken or that just need a mentor. We're out there trying to pay it forward.
You bet. Well, that's awesome, brother. Listen, you have a great night, and I will catch up with you later. I'll give you a call in about 15 minutes, all right?
All right, sir. Thank you. It was an
All
honor.
right. Hey, man, my honor was all mine. You take care. Hoorah. Hey, folks, thanks for hanging out and watching this. I hope to see you guys again on another Tall Tales with Taco Bell. Like I said, leave in the comments what's a good time. If you wanted to join a live program like this and ask a question of the guest, what is a good time to actually do that? You guys have a good one. We'll see you next time. Adios, hasta luego, auf Wiedersehen. Tschüss, shishine, au revoir, domarigato gozaimasu. Tando shinde kurasai, ciao, arrivederci, das vidania, do widzenia.